They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but what if it's served in front of 300 wedding guests? Evelyn Crowley thought she'd won. She'd erased the girl her son loved, buried her beneath scandal and silence, and now she was about to crown her victory with the wedding of the century. So she sent one final invitation, a cruel joke, a twisted trophy. She expected tears. She expected surrender. What she got instead were twin boys with her son's eyes, a mother who'd become a lawyer in the dark, and the complete annihilation of everything she'd ever built. Stay until the end. Hit that like button. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Mara Quinn almost didn't open it. 4 years had taught her to recognize poison when she saw it, and the cream-colored cardstock with its gold-embossed return address reeked of venom. Crowley Estate. Evelyn Crowley's personal stationery, the kind that cost more per sheet than Mara used to make in a day. She stood in the narrow galley kitchen of her Boston apartment, still wearing her courthouse blazer, her twins napping in the bedroom down the hall. The envelope sat on the counter like a coiled snake. "Mama?" Liam's small voice came from the doorway. At 3.5, he was already too perceptive for his own good. "You okay?" She turned, forcing brightness into her smile. "I'm perfect, baby. Go play with your brother for a few more minutes, okay? Then we'll have snack time." He studied her with those devastating blue eyes, his father's eyes, then nodded and patted back down the hall in his mismatched socks. Mara waited until she heard the soft clicks of building blocks before she picked up the envelope. Her hands didn't shake. They'd stopped shaking 2 years ago, right around the time she'd passed the bar exam while working 3 jobs and raising 2 toddlers alone. Survival had a way of burning the tremors right out of you. She slid her finger under the seal. Mr. and Mrs. Theodore Crowley. Third, request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their son, Theodore Crowley IV, to Miss Charlotte Ashford Pemberton. Mara read it twice, then a third time, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Theodore was getting married. Theo. Her Theo, who'd whispered promises in the dark, who'd loved her so fiercely his mother had to destroy them both to pull them apart. The man who'd chosen his inheritance over their future, who'd signed the papers his mother put in front of him, and walked away while Mara was still pregnant with twins she didn't yet know she carried. The wedding was in 6 weeks. Manhattan, the Plaza Hotel, black tie, and Evelyn Crowley had invited her. Mara's laugh came out sharp and bitter, echoing off the cheap laminate counters. She understood immediately. This wasn't an oversight or a clerical error. This was Evelyn's final act of cruelty, a masterstroke of psychological warfare. The matriarch wanted to parade her victory, to have Mara witness the moment her son married the appropriate girl from the correct family. To see Mara broken, desperate, alone, proof that Evelyn Crowley always won. "Well," Mara whispered to the empty kitchen, she got one thing right. She was going to witness it, just not the way Evelyn expected. Evelyn Crowley sat in the library of her Fifth Avenue penthouse, reviewing seating charts with the precision of a general planning an invasion. At 62, she remained formidable, silver hair swept into an immaculate chignon, Chanel suit pressed to razor-sharp creases, diamond studs that cost more than most people's homes glinting at her ears. "Put the Vanderbilts near the head table," she instructed her wedding planner, a trembling woman named Patricia who'd learned not to question Evelyn's decisions. But not too close. Charlotte's family should have clear sight lines to Theodore. Optics matter. "Yes, Mrs. Crowley." Patricia made a note. "And the final additions to the guest list?" Evelyn's smile was a blade. "Ah, yes. Did you send the invitation to Mara Quinn?" Patricia's pen hovered over her clipboard. Are you certain? Given the history?" "I'm quite certain." Evelyn's voice could have frozen wine. "Use the address my investigator provided. The apartment in that charming little neighborhood in Boston, Dorchester, wasn't it?" "Yes, ma'am." Patricia swallowed. "May I ask?" "No." Evelyn stood, smoothing her skirt. "You may not. Simply ensure it arrives. Proper postage. Formal addressing. I want her to open it herself." After Patricia scurried away, Evelyn poured herself 2 fingers of scotch and moved to the window overlooking Central Park. The city sprawled beneath her like a kingdom, every light a subject, every building a testament to power properly wielded. 4 years ago, that Quinn girl had almost destroyed everything. Theodore had been 28, already being groomed to take over the family's investment empire, and he'd fallen catastrophically in love with a nobody, a waitress with a high school diploma and starry eyes, working double shifts at some pedestrian restaurant in Brooklyn. The relationship had been a disaster waiting to happen. Mara Quinn had no pedigree, no connections, no value beyond her youth and her ability to make Theodore forget his responsibilities. When he'd announced his intention to marry her, Evelyn had acted swiftly. The private investigator had been easy enough. Manufacturing evidence of infidelity had taken slightly more creativity. A few carefully staged photographs, some doctored phone records, a strategically placed witness willing to testify to seeing Mara with another man. Theodore, for all his education, had been pathetically easy to manipulate. Show a man what he fears most, and he'll believe anything. The breakup had been swift and brutal. Theodore had confronted Mara, refused to listen to her denials, and signed the non-disclosure agreement Evelyn's lawyers had prepared. In exchange for Mara's silence about the relationship and any potential claims against the family, she'd received $50,000 and a legally binding promise to never contact the Crowleys again. Mara had taken the money. Evelyn had watched the security footage from the lawyer's office. The girl had looked devastated, destroyed, barely able to sign her name through the tears. Perfect. What Evelyn hadn't known, what her investigators had somehow missed in their thoroughness, was that Mara was already 6 weeks pregnant, with twins. By the time Evelyn's sources discovered this detail, Mara had vanished. No forwarding address, no trace, no way to leverage the situation. For 3 months, Evelyn had waited for the demand for money, for the tabloid exposé, for the paternity suit. Nothing came. Eventually, Evelyn had concluded that the girl must have terminated the pregnancy and disappeared to start over somewhere. Probably took the $50,000 and ran, just as Evelyn had predicted. Weak, predictable, conquered. Now, 4 years later, Theodore was marrying Charlotte Pemberton, Vassar-educated, old money, board positions lined up like dominoes. The merger of Crowley Holdings and Pemberton Finance would create an empire worth billions. This wedding wasn't just a ceremony, it was a coronation, and Evelyn wanted one witness to her absolute triumph. She raised her glass to the city lights. To victory, she whispered, and to those who know when they've lost. Mara stood in her bedroom at 2 a.m., staring at her reflection in the mirror hanging on the back of the closet door. Liam and Connor slept in their shared bedroom across the hall, their soft breathing the only sound in the apartment besides the occasional rumble of late-night traffic. She looked different than she had 4 years ago. Harder. Sharper. The girl who'd believed in fairy tales had been burned away, leaving someone made of steel and spite and hard-earned competence. The invitation sat on her dresser, propped against the lamp. She'd spent the last 6 weeks thinking about it, debating, planning. The anger had been immediate and molten. How dare Evelyn invite her? How dare that woman think she could twist the knife one more time and find anything left to cut? But anger, Mara had learned, was only useful if you could forge it into something actionable. So she'd done what she always did now. She'd researched. She'd pulled court records on the Crowley family, every lawsuit, every settlement, every whisper of impropriety hidden behind expensive lawyers and sealed documents. She'd found patterns. Evelyn Crowley didn't just win, she destroyed. Business partners who'd crossed her ended up bankrupt. Employees who'd complained found themselves unemployable. Even family members who disagreed with her publicly had been systematically erased from the dynasty. The woman was a monster, and Theodore had let her win. That hurt worse than the fabricated infidelity, worse than the forced separation. Theodore had chosen this. When Mara had begged him to listen, to let her explain, to just look at the evidence that proved those photographs were fake, he'd turned his back. He'd signed papers that silenced her, taken his mother's word over hers, and walked away from what they'd built together. She'd hated him for that. Sometimes she still did. But Liam had his smile. Connor had his laugh. And both boys had his brilliant analytical mind, the way Theodore used to attack problems like puzzles, turning them over until he found the solution. Mara had spent 3 years telling herself the boys were better off without him, that a father who could be manipulated so easily wasn't worth having, that she and her sons were a complete family, self-sufficient and strong. But at night, when Connor asked why they didn't have a daddy like the other kids at daycare, or when Liam traced the shape of his own face in the mirror with that eerily adult concentration, she wondered. The invitation was an attack. Evelyn knew that. But maybe, Mara thought, it could be something else too. Maybe it could be a door. She picked up her phone and pulled up the photos she'd taken last week at the twins' birthday party. Liam and Connor, frosting smeared and laughing, wearing matching superhero shirts. Their faces were Theodore's face at that age. She'd seen the childhood photos during their relationship, back when she'd been welcomed into the Crowley penthouse, back when Evelyn had pretended to accept her. DNA didn't lie, and Mara had something Evelyn Crowley had spent 4 years believing didn't exist. She had leverage. The question was what to do with it. She could ignore the invitation, let Evelyn think she'd won, continue raising the boys in peace, continue building her law career one case at a time, continue this hard-won life of independence and dignity. It was the safe choice, the smart choice. Or she could show up. Mara thought about the woman who'd fabricated evidence to destroy her relationship. The woman who'd threatened her, bribed her, used the full weight of her power to crush someone she saw as beneath her. The woman who'd spent 4 years believing she was untouchable. The woman who had no idea her grandsons existed. A smile curved Mara's lips, sharp as broken glass. She pulled out her laptop and started typing. First, an email to her supervisor at the nonprofit law clinic where she worked, requesting 3 days off. Then, a search for train tickets to New York. Then, because she was thorough and she'd learned to document everything, she opened a new folder on her desktop and titled it Crowley. She'd need DNA evidence, formal, legal, indisputable. The boys' birth certificates, which listed father unknown. Medical records, a notarized affidavit of paternity. She started making lists, her lawyer's mind organizing the attack like a brief. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge was emotional, sloppy, ultimately unsatisfying. This was about truth and accountability and showing Evelyn Crowley that some people don't stay buried. Mara worked until dawn, planning every detail. When Liam and Connor woke up, she had breakfast ready and a smile on her face. "Guess what, boys?" she said, pouring orange juice into their plastic cups. "We're going on a trip." Theodore Crowley IV stood in his corner office at Crowley Holdings, staring at the same view of Manhattan his mother commanded from her penthouse 12 blocks north. The city looked different from here, less like a kingdom, more like a cage. "Mr. Crowley?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Miss Pemberton is here for your lunch appointment." Theodore checked his watch. 12:30 exactly. Charlotte was always exactly on time, one of the many qualities his mother approved of. "Send her in, Marie." Charlotte entered like she owned the space, tailored navy dress, pearls, honey blonde hair, and a sleek low ponytail. She was beautiful in the way of women who'd never had to worry about being beautiful, who'd been told since birth that their appearance was just one of many assets to be managed and optimized. "Darling." She crossed to him, presenting her cheek for a kiss that landed somewhere near her ear. "I can only stay 40 minutes. Mother wants to finalize the flower arrangements this afternoon, and apparently my input is crucial." Her tone suggested she found this absurd, but was too well-bred to say so directly. "Of course." Theodore gestured to the sitting area of his office, where Marie had already laid out lunch from Charlotte's favorite bistro. "Everything on schedule?" "As far as I know, your mother has been—" Charlotte paused delicately, selecting a fork. "Thorough." That was one word for it. Theodore had barely been involved in planning his own wedding. Evelyn had taken over completely, turning what should have been a celebration into a military operation. Guest list, seating chart, menu, music, all Evelyn's decisions, all optimized for maximum social and business impact. "She wants it to be perfect," Theodore said, the words automatic. Charlotte studied him over her wine glass. "Do you ever wonder if we should have just eloped?" He looked at her, genuinely surprised. Charlotte never questioned the plan. She was the plan, the merger, the alliance, the perfect next move in the dynasty's expansion. "Do you want to elope?" he asked. She laughed, light and practiced. Of course not. Can you imagine the scandal? Besides, Mother has already ordered 500 programs. She set down her glass. I'm simply saying that sometimes I feel like we're the supporting characters in someone else's production. We are, Theodore said before he could stop himself. Silence stretched between them. Outside, horns blared, the city conducting its eternal symphony of ambition and noise. Theodore, Charlotte's voice was gentler than usual. Are you having second thoughts? No. The word came quickly, too quickly. No, I'm just tired. Busy quarter. She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes, but she was too tactful to press. That was another quality his mother loved about Charlotte. She never pushed, never demanded messy emotional excavations, never asked him to be anything other than what he appeared to be. Unlike Mara, who'd looked at him like she could see straight through to his bones. Theodore pushed the thought away violently. He didn't think about Mara anymore. Couldn't think about her. The betrayal had been too deep, too complete. His mother had shown him the photographs. Mara with another man, intimate and damning. The private investigator's report, the testimony of a witness who'd seen them together multiple times. When he'd confronted her, Mara had denied everything, tears streaming down her face, begging him to believe her. But the evidence had been overwhelming, and his mother's voice in his head had been louder. She was using you, Theodore, for money, for status, for access. Girls like that always are. So he'd signed the papers, paid her off, cut her out of his life like a cancer. The nightmares had lasted months. Dreams where Mara showed up at his door, pregnant, desperate. Dreams where she was telling the truth, and he destroyed the only real thing he'd ever had. He'd wake up sweating, reaching for his phone to call her, then remembering the NDA, the severance of contact, the finality of what he'd done. Eventually, the dreams had faded. Work had consumed him. His mother had introduced him to Charlotte at a charity gala. The merger had made sense, strategic, beneficial, clean. He'd convinced himself he was content. The seating chart arrived this morning, Charlotte was saying, pulling him back to the present. Your mother made some interesting choices. Oh? Apparently she invited someone named Mara Quinn? Charlotte's inflection made it a question. The name's not familiar to me, but she's seated in the back. Way in the back. I assumed she was some distant business connection, but Marie mentioned she's not in the database. Theodore's fork clattered against his plate. Theodore? Charlotte leaned forward. Are you all right? You've gone completely pale. Fine. He forced himself to breathe. I'm fine. Excuse me. He stood abruptly and crossed to the window, his reflection ghost-like against the glass. Behind him, he could hear Charlotte setting down her napkin, preparing to leave with the graceful efficiency she applied to all awkward situations. I'll see you at the rehearsal dinner Friday, she said. Try to get some rest, darling. You look exhausted. He waited until the door clicked shut before he pulled out his phone with shaking hands. His mother answered on the first ring. Theodore, to what do I owe? You invited Mara Quinn to the wedding. Silence. Then smooth as oil. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. Don't! His voice came out harder than he'd intended. Don't lie to me. Charlotte just saw the seating chart. Ah! Evelyn's tone shifted, acquiring that particular edge she used when she was most pleased with herself. Yes, I did send an invitation to Miss Quinn. Is there a problem? Why would you do that? Because, darling, victory is sweetest when witnessed by those who've lost. A pause. Don't tell me you're still harboring feelings for that girl. Theodore's free hand clenched into a fist against the window. She cheated on me. She took the money and disappeared. Why would you want her there? Precisely because she won't come. Evelyn laughed, delighted. That's the beauty of it. She'll receive the invitation, see what she could have had if she'd been someone else, and it will remind her exactly where she belongs, which is nowhere near this family. And if she does come? She won't, Evelyn said with absolute certainty. Women like that understand their place. They slink away and stay away. Trust me, Theodore. Everything is under control. She hung up before he could respond. Theodore stood at the window for a long time, watching the city move below him. Somewhere out there, Mara was receiving an invitation to his wedding. Somewhere out there, the woman he'd loved, the woman who'd betrayed him, was holding proof that he was moving on, marrying someone else, becoming someone else. His mother was right. Mara wouldn't come. She wouldn't. The law offices of Hernandez and Song occupied the fourth floor of a converted warehouse in Cambridge, smelling perpetually of coffee and toner ink. Mara had worked there for 2 years, first as a paralegal during law school, then as a junior associate after passing the bar. "You want 3 days off for what?" Maria Hernandez, the senior partner, set down her mug and stared at Mara across the cluttered desk. "Personal matter," Mara said carefully. She'd debated how much to reveal and decided that less was safer. "Family related. I have the vacation days." "You have the days," Maria agreed. "I'm just surprised you're using them. You've been here 2 years, and I don't think you've taken a sick day." Her dark eyes were shrewd, assessing. This family matter wouldn't involve the boy's father, would it? Mara had told Maria the bare minimum when she'd interviewed: single mother, twins, father not in the picture. Maria had hired her anyway, impressed by her work ethic and her fierce attention to detail. "In a manner of speaking," Mara said. Maria leaned back in her chair, regarding Mara with the same intensity she used on hostile witnesses. "You're one of the best young attorneys I've seen in 20 years of practice. Instincts like a knife, preparation like a general. You don't do anything without a reason." She paused. "Whatever you're planning, make sure you're protected, legally and otherwise." "I am." "Good," Maria nodded. "Take the time. And Mara, if you need backup, lawyer to lawyer, you call me." Mara felt something loosen in her chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I'm billing you for the consultation if this turns into a case." They both smiled, and Mara left feeling less alone than she had in years. Quote, "The DNA testing took 2 weeks. Mara had used a private lab, paid extra for expedited results, and requested the most comprehensive paternity panel available. The report, when it arrived, was 40 pages of genetic markers and probability calculations, all concluding with 99.99% certainty that Theodore Crowley IV was the biological father of Liam Alexander Quinn and Connor James Quinn. Mara held the document like a weapon, because that's exactly what it was. Next came the affidavit. She drafted it herself, had it notarized at the courthouse, and attached every piece of supporting evidence: birth certificates, medical records from her prenatal care, photographs of Theodore with her during their relationship. She'd kept 3, hidden in a box under her bed, unable to completely destroy the proof that she'd once been loved. The final piece was the hardest. She needed to look the part. Not defeated, not desperate, not the struggling single mother Evelyn expected to see. Mara couldn't afford designer clothes, but she knew how to shop. She found a midnight blue gown at a consignment store in Back Bay. Last season's Calvin Klein, elegant and architectural, the kind of dress that commanded attention without begging for it. $75, marked down from $2,000. Shoes came from a discount outlet. Haircut from a training salon where advanced students worked for cheap under supervision. She bought makeup at the drugstore and practiced for a week, watching YouTube tutorials until she could contour her face into something striking and severe. The twins watched her with identical expressions of confusion. "Why are you wearing fancy dress, Mama?" Connor asked, reaching out to touch the blue silk. "I have to go to a party," Mara said, crouching down to their eye level. "A very important party where I need to look like I belong there." "Are we coming?" Liam wanted to know. Mara had agonized over this question for days. Bringing the boys was the nuclear option, the move that couldn't be undone. It would expose them to chaos and attention and the full force of Evelyn's wrath. But it would also prove, immediately and undeniably, that she was telling the truth. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, you're coming, but you need to be very brave and very good, okay? Can you do that for Mama?" They nodded solemnly, too young to understand what they were agreeing to. Mara hugged them both tightly, breathing in the scent of their shampoo and the particular sweetness of small children. "I love you," she whispered, "more than anything in the world, and I'm doing this because you deserve to know where you came from. Even if where they came from was chaos and lies and a family that would never accept them." The hotel in Manhattan was modest, a business traveler's chain near Penn Station, chosen for its proximity to the venue and its reasonable rates. Mara had booked a single room with 2 double beds. The boys thought it was an adventure, jumping on the mattresses and exploring the tiny bathroom with its individual soaps and shampoos. "Can we order room service?" Liam asked, studying the menu card with intense concentration. "Nice try," Mara said, pulling out the bag of groceries she'd bought from a corner deli. "We're having sandwiches and fruit, like normal people." They ate picnic style on the floor, the boys chattering about the train ride and the tall buildings and whether they might see Spider-Man. Mara let them talk, watching their faces, memorizing the moment before everything changed. After they fell asleep, she stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, 12 blocks north and 40 stories up, Evelyn Crowley was probably sipping expensive scotch and congratulating herself on a perfectly executed plan. Mara's phone buzzed. Text from Maria. "Good luck tomorrow. Remember, you're the one with truth on your side. That's a stronger position than money." Another text, this one from Yolanda, her best friend and the boy's godmother. "Burn it down, girl. Burn it all down." Mara smiled in the darkness. She'd spent 4 years building a life out of nothing, 4 years working doubles and studying through the night and raising twin boys alone, 4 years proving that she was more than what Evelyn Crowley had tried to make her, more than the disposable girl, the mistake, the problem to be solved with money and NDAs. Tomorrow, the world would see exactly who Mara Quinn had become, and Evelyn Crowley would learn what it felt like to lose. The Plaza Hotel looked like a castle made of marble and gold. Mara stood across Fifth Avenue, holding Liam and Connor by the hands, staring up at the Baroque facade, where fairy tales came true for people who could afford them. "Whoa," Connor breathed. "Is that where the party is?" "That's where the party is," Mara confirmed. She dressed the boys carefully, matching navy suits from Target, white button-down shirts, tiny clip-on ties. They looked unbearably sweet and heartbreakingly formal, like miniature versions of the man who'd never met them. Mara wore the blue gown and heels that made her 3 inches taller. She'd styled her dark hair in a sleek updo, applied makeup with a careful hand, and put on the only jewelry she owned, small pearl earrings her grandmother had left her. In the hotel mirror, she'd looked like someone who belonged in places like this. On the street, facing the actual venue, she felt like an imposter in a borrowed costume. "Mama?" Liam tugged her hand. "You're squeezing too hard." She loosened her grip, took a breath. "Sorry, baby." A steady stream of guests flowed through the entrance. Women in designer gowns, men in tuxedos, the kind of people who navigated luxury like it was oxygen. Mara recognized some of them from business magazines and society pages. The Vanderbilts, the Astors, old money and new money, and the kind of power that moved markets. She'd researched the guest list, cross-referencing the names her old contacts had whispered to her. 300 people. Every major family in New York society, business titans and political donors and people whose names appeared in history books, all here to witness Theodore Crowley marry Charlotte Pemberton. All about to witness something entirely different. "Ready?" Mara asked her sons. They nodded, eyes wide and uncertain. "Remember what we practiced. You hold my hands, you stay close, and no matter what happens, you know Mama loves you. Okay?" "Okay," they chorused. Mara checked her small clutch one final time. Invitation. ID. The DNA report, printed on official letterhead, sealed in a legal envelope. Her phone, fully charged, recording app ready. She'd thought of everything, except how she'd feel when she actually walked through those doors. She thought of Evelyn's cruelty, Theodore's betrayal, 4 years of silence and struggle and rebuilding from ashes. She thought of Liam asking why they didn't have a daddy, Connor tracing his own face in mirrors. She thought of the truth, simple, undeniable, powerful. "Let's go," she said. They crossed Fifth Avenue, climbed the steps, and entered the Plaza Hotel. The lobby was full of light and music and the low murmur of wealth at ease. A woman in a black suit stood at a podium, checking invitations against a master list. She looked up as Mara approached, her professional smile flickering slightly as she took in the twins. "Name?" she asked. "Mara Quinn," Mara said clearly. "I was invited." The woman's fingers flew over her tablet. Her smile froze. Miss Quinn. Yes, you're on the list. Her gaze dropped to Liam and Connor. Are these children on your invitation? They're my +2, Mara said smoothly. Is there a problem? The woman's training warred with her confusion. Training 1. Of course not. Welcome to the Crowley Pemberton wedding. The ceremony begins in 30 minutes. The grand ballroom is... I know where it is, Mara said. She'd been here before, 4.5 years ago, when Theodore had brought her to a charity gala and whispered that he wanted to marry her someday, before his mother had turned love into a weapon and wielded it with surgical precision. Mara led the boys through the corridor, following the sound of string music and expensive perfume. Staff members gave her curious looks. The gown was elegant, but not couture. The children were unexpected. Something about the whole picture didn't quite fit. Perfect. The grand ballroom doors stood open, revealing a space transformed into a garden of white roses and crystal. Chairs lined in ivory silk, an aisle carpeted in rose petals. At the front, beneath an arch of flowers that probably cost more than Mara made in 6 months, Theodore stood with his groomsmen. He hadn't seen her yet. He was laughing at something one of them said, relaxed and handsome in his tuxedo, every inch the perfect groom about to marry the perfect bride and take his perfect place in his family's empire. Mara's grip on the boy's hands tightened. An usher approached, young and polite. "May I show you to your seat?" "Please," Mara said. He checked his chart. "Quinn." Yes, you're in the back section, left side." Where Evelyn had placed her. As far from the family as possible. A deliberate insult, a calculated placement. "Actually," Mara said, her voice carrying the particular authority she'd learned in courtrooms, "I need to speak with Mrs. Crowley before the ceremony begins. Could you let her know Mara Quinn is here?" The usher hesitated. "I'm not sure that's..." "Now, please." Something in her tone made him step back. I'll find her." He disappeared into the controlled chaos of pre-ceremony preparations. Mara stood in the doorway, the twins pressed against her sides, and waited. 2 minutes later, Evelyn Crowley appeared from a side entrance, moving through the crowd like a shark through water. Graceful, predatory, absolutely in control. She wore champagne silk and diamonds, her silver hair perfect. Her expression arranged in polite inquiry that didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes found Mara, found the boys. And Evelyn Crowley's mask cracked. It was subtle, a brief widening, a momentary pause in her confident stride. But Mara saw it. Recognition. Calculation. The instant understanding that something had gone catastrophically wrong. Evelyn recovered quickly, crossing the remaining distance with her society smile firmly in place. "Miss Quinn," she said, voice warm as ice. "What a surprise. I wasn't certain you'd accept the invitation." "You were counting on me not to," Mara replied. "That was the point, wasn't it?" Evelyn's gaze dropped to Liam and Connor, who stared back with those unmistakable blue eyes. Theodore's eyes. The Crowley eyes that had appeared in 4 generations of family portraits. "Charming children," Evelyn said faintly. "Are they yours?" "They're ours," Mara said. "Yours and mine and Theodore's. Meet your grandsons, Mrs. Crowley. Liam and Connor. They're 3.5, born exactly 9 months after your son signed those papers and walked away." The color drained from Evelyn's face. Around them, guests were beginning to notice the confrontation, heads turning, whispers starting, the particular energy of scandal beginning to charge the air. "I don't know what game you think you're playing," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "but this is not the time or place." "You invited me here," Mara interrupted. "You wanted me to witness your victory, so here I am, witnessing." She reached into her clutch and pulled out the sealed envelope. "This is a DNA report from Accugene Laboratories. 99.99% probability that Theodore Crowley IV is the biological father of my sons. I have birth certificates, medical records, photographs, 4 years of documentation proving that while you were congratulating yourself on destroying our relationship, I was raising your grandchildren alone." Evelyn's hand shook slightly as she took the envelope. She didn't open it. This is extortion, she hissed. No, Mara said calmly. This is truth, and you invited me here to deliver it. She looked past Evelyn to where Theodore had finally noticed the commotion and was moving toward them, his expression confused and alarmed. I think your son deserves to know he's a father, don't you? Evelyn turned, saw Theodore approaching, and made a decision. Her hand shot out, gripping Mara's arm with surprising strength. If you say one word, she breathed, if you cause a scene at this wedding, I will destroy you. I will take those children. I will bury you in legal fees and custody battles and— Let go of my mother! Liam's small voice cut through the threat like a bell. Theodore had reached them now, his face pale. Mother? What's going on? Mara? He was looking at her directly for the first time in 4 years. Mara watched the emotions cascade across his face. Shock, confusion, residual anger, and then his gaze dropping to the boys, to their faces, their eyes, their unmistakable resemblance to the man staring down at them. Theodore, Evelyn said quickly, this woman is attempting to disrupt— We look like you, Connor said with the simple clarity of childhood. He pointed at Theodore. Mama showed us pictures. We have the same eyes. The entire ballroom had gone quiet. 300 guests collectively holding their breath. Theodore's knees buckled slightly. He reached out, steadying himself against a chair. Mara, he whispered. What? From somewhere behind them, a woman's voice called out, clear and confused and terrible in its timing. Theodore? Darling? Is everything all right? Charlotte Pemberton emerged from the bridal suite in a gown that probably cost more than Mara's entire life. She looked like a fairy tale, all lace and innocence and perfect blonde beauty. She looked at Theodore, at Mara, at the twins. And Mara watched the bride's fairy tale shatter in real time, right there in front of 300 witnesses. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel erupted into chaos. Charlotte Pemberton stood frozen in her wedding gown, a vision of ivory lace and shattered dreams staring at the scene unfolding before her like a car crash in slow motion. Her hand flew to her mouth, diamond engagement ring catching the light from the crystal chandeliers overhead. Theodore? Her voice cracked on his name. What is happening? But Theodore couldn't answer. He was staring at Liam and Connor with an expression Mara had never seen on his face before. Absolute devastation mixed with dawning recognition. His lips moved soundlessly, forming words that wouldn't come. Evelyn recovered first, her decades of social warfare snapping into place like armor. She released Mara's arm and turned to face the growing crowd of onlookers with a smile that could cut glass. Everyone please, she announced, her voice projecting perfectly across the ballroom. There's been a small misunderstanding. If you'll give us just a moment to resolve this privately— No! The word came from Theodore, quiet but absolute. He hadn't moved, hadn't looked away from the boys. No more private conversations, no more misunderstandings. His eyes finally lifted to Mara's face, and she saw something break behind them. How old did you say they are? 3.5, Mara replied steadily. Born September 15th. 37 weeks gestation, which means I was already pregnant when you signed those papers your mother put in front of you. A gasp rippled through the assembled guests. Cell phones appeared, angled discreetly for photographs and video. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. This was a spectacle, witnessed and recorded by some of the most influential people in New York, exactly what Mara had counted on. You were pregnant, Theodore repeated, the words hollow. You were pregnant and you didn't tell me. I tried to tell you, Mara said, and years of suppressed anger bled through her controlled tone. I called 17 times. I sent emails. I showed up at your office and security escorted me out. Your mother's lawyers sent me a cease and desist letter threatening criminal harassment charges if I attempted contact again. She pulled her phone from her clutch, pulled up the screenshots she'd saved for 4 years. I have every message, every attempt, every door you slammed in my face. Charlotte made a small, wounded sound. Her maid of honor, a tall brunette in rose silk, rushed to her side, steadying her. This can't be real, Charlotte whispered. Theodore, tell me this isn't real. But Theodore was already moving, dropping to one knee in front of the twins with a motion so sudden that Liam instinctively stepped back. Connor, braver or more curious, stayed put, tilting his head to study the man kneeling before him. "What are your names?" Theodore's voice shook. "I'm Connor James Quinn," Connor announced with the formality of a child who'd been taught good manners. "And that's my brother Liam Alexander Quinn. He's shy, but he's really smart." "Liam," Theodore repeated. "Connor." His hand reached out, trembling, then stopped inches from Connor's face. Can I? Connor looked up at Mara. She nodded, barely, and Connor looked back at Theodore. "You can touch my face if you want. Mama says we have your eyes." Theodore's composure shattered. His hand cupped Connor's small cheek, thumb brushing under one blue eye, and the sob that broke from him echoed across the silent ballroom. "Oh my God," he breathed. "Oh my God, they're mine. They're really mine." Evelyn lunged forward, grabbing Theodore's shoulder. "Get up," she hissed. "Get up right now. You're making a scene." "Making a scene?" Theodore stood slowly, turning to face his mother with an expression Mara had never seen him wear, pure, incandescent rage. "You hid my children from me. You threatened the mother of my children. You manufactured evidence to destroy my relationship, and then you made sure she couldn't tell me the truth." His voice rose with each word. "And you're worried about a scene?" "I protected you," Evelyn snapped, her own composure cracking. "That girl was using you, just like I said. She was probably pregnant by someone else, and—" "There's a DNA test," Mara interrupted, holding up the envelope Evelyn had dropped. "From an accredited laboratory, admissible in court. Would you like me to read the results out loud, Mrs. Crowley? In front of all your guests?" Evelyn's face went white, then red. "You scheming little—" "Mother," Theodore's voice cut like a blade. "Stop talking." The wedding planner appeared at Evelyn's elbow, her face pale and panicked. "Mrs. Crowley, the musicians are asking if they should— The ceremony was supposed to start 10 minutes ago, and the guests are—" "Cancel it," Theodore said flatly. Charlotte let out a strangled cry. "What?" "Cancel the wedding." Theodore turned to her, and Mara saw genuine anguish in his face. "Charlotte, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry, but I can't. We can't." He gestured helplessly at the chaos around them. "I have children. I have sons I didn't know existed. I need to." "You need to what?" Charlotte's voice climbed, losing its careful modulation. "You need to what, Theodore? Abandon our wedding because some woman shows up with children claiming they're yours? How do you even know she's telling the truth?" "Look at them," Theodore shouted, pointing at Liam and Connor. "Just look at them, Charlotte. They have my face, my eyes, my—" He stopped, ran his hands through his hair. "I know. I just know." Charlotte stared at him for a long moment. Then, with deliberate precision, she removed her engagement ring and threw it at his chest. It bounced off and clattered to the marble floor, the sound impossibly loud. "We're done," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "We are absolutely done. You can have your instant family with your secret children and your— She looked at Mara with pure venom. "You're trash. Don't." Mara's voice could have frozen blood. "Don't you dare speak about my children that way." "Your children?" Charlotte laughed, shrill and breaking. "You mean the children you used to trap a wealthy man? Very original, very classy." Liam pressed closer to Mara's leg, frightened by the shouting. Connor's small hand found his brother's, squeezing tight. Watching them, seeing her boys scared and confused in the middle of this expensive nightmare, Mara felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. "Liam, Connor," she said quietly. "Close your eyes for a moment." They obeyed, Liam burying his face against her hip. Mara looked at Charlotte Pemberton, at Evelyn Crowley, at all the assembled witnesses to this spectacular implosion. "I don't trap people," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "I survived them. I survived being discarded like garbage by a man who believed lies over the woman he claimed to love. I survived having every door slammed in my face when I tried to tell him the truth. I survived raising twin boys alone while working 3 jobs and putting myself through law school. And I survived a woman who thought she could erase me with money and threats and legal documents." She looked directly at Evelyn. "But I never stopped existing, Mrs. Crowley. Neither did your grandsons. We were just invisible to you because you chose not to see." "How dare you?" Evelyn started. "You invited me here," Mara cut her off. "You wanted to parade your victory. You wanted me to see what I'd lost. Well, I came. And now everyone sees what you did." She gestured to the crowd, to the phones still recording, to the society reporters she knew were present. Every lie, every manipulation, every cruelty, it's all on display now, just like you wanted. How does it feel, Mrs. Crowley? Does your victory taste as sweet as you imagined? The silence that followed was absolute. Then someone in the crowd began to clap. Slow, deliberate applause that grew as others joined in. Not everyone, some of Evelyn's allies looked horrified. But enough. Enough to matter. Evelyn's face transformed into something ugly and desperate. "Get out!" she snarled at Mara. "Get out of here before I have you arrested for trespassing." "I was invited," Mara reminded her. "You sent the invitation yourself. Consider it rescinded." "Actually," a new voice interrupted, "I'd like to hear more." An older man in an impeccable tuxedo stepped forward from the crowd. Mara recognized him from her research. Harrison Pemberton, Charlotte's father, chairman of Pemberton Finance, and one of the most powerful bankers in New York. His face was carefully neutral, but his eyes were calculating. "Mr. Pemberton," Evelyn began, "I apologize for this disruption. If we could speak privately." "I don't think so." Pemberton's gaze swept over Theodore, still kneeling near the twins, then to Evelyn. "Mrs. Crowley, you and I had an agreement, a merger of our families and our firms predicated on certain assurances. One of those assurances was that your son came with no entanglements, no scandals, no hidden liabilities." "This woman is lying," Evelyn insisted. "The DNA test is fabricated. She's a con artist looking for—" "I don't think she's lying." Pemberton cut her off with the casual authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I think those boys are legitimate Crowley heirs, which means you've been negotiating our merger in bad faith, knowing full well there were complications you failed to disclose." Evelyn's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. "Furthermore," Pemberton continued, "I'm watching you threaten the mother of your grandchildren in front of 300 witnesses. I'm watching you prioritize social appearances over family. And I'm thinking that perhaps Pemberton Finance doesn't want to be associated with Crowley Holdings after all." He turned to his daughter. "Charlotte, get your things. We're leaving." Charlotte stared at him. "Daddy? Now, sweetheart." Charlotte looked at Theodore one last time, her beautiful face streaked with tears and ruined makeup. "I hope she was worth it," she said quietly. Then she gathered her skirts and swept from the ballroom, her wedding party trailing behind her like the wreckage of a shipwreck. The exodus had begun. Other guests, sensing the party was definitively over, began making their excuses and heading for the exits. Within minutes, the ballroom was half empty. The remaining attendees clustered in small groups, whispering and staring. Theodore stood slowly, facing his mother. "Tell me everything," he said. "Every lie you told, every piece of evidence you fabricated, every threat you made, all of it." Evelyn drew herself up, attempting to reclaim her authority. "I did what was necessary to protect you from making a catastrophic mistake." "You destroyed my life!" Theodore's shout made Liam flinch. He immediately lowered his voice, but the fury remained. "You took away 4 years with my children. You made me believe the woman I loved betrayed me. You turned me into someone who could walk away from—" He gestured helplessly at Mara and the twins. "From this. From them." "She wasn't suitable," Evelyn said coldly. "She had nothing. She was nothing. A waitress with delusions of—" "She's a lawyer!" Theodore exploded. "She raised our children alone while earning a law degree. She's more accomplished than half the people in this room." Mara's throat tightened. She hadn't expected him to defend her, not after everything. "Theodore," she said quietly, "the boys are getting scared. Can we take this somewhere less public?" He looked down at Liam and Connor, both pressed against their mother, eyes wide with fear and confusion. His face crumpled. "Yes, of course. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He looked around the rapidly emptying ballroom. "There's a private room upstairs, my suite. We can talk there." "Absolutely not," Evelyn interjected. "You are not taking this woman anywhere without lawyers present. She's already proven she's willing to—" "Mother," Theodore's voice was ice. "You've said enough. You've done enough. I need you to leave." Evelyn stared at him, genuinely shocked. "Excuse me?" "Leave. Get out. I can't look at you right now without wanting to—" He stopped, visibly controlling himself. "Just go, please." For the first time in perhaps her entire adult life, Evelyn Crowley had no response. She looked at her son, at the woman who'd invaded her perfect event, at the grandchildren she'd spent 4 years not knowing existed. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her champagne silk gown swishing against the marble, her spine rigid with fury and defeat. The remaining guests scattered like birds startled by a gunshot. Within 10 minutes, the ballroom was empty except for Mara, Theodore, the twins, and a few shell-shocked staff members who didn't know whether to clean up or call security. Theodore stood in the wreckage of his wedding day, rose petals scattered across marble, abandoned champagne glasses, a wedding cake nobody would eat, and looked at Mara like he was seeing her for the first time. "Will you come upstairs?" he asked. "Please. We need to talk." Mara looked down at her sons. "Boys? Are you okay with that?" Connor nodded bravely. Liam whispered, "Is he really our daddy?" The question hit Theodore like a physical blow. He dropped to his knees again, bringing himself to their eye level. "I am," he said, his voice thick with tears. "I'm your daddy, and I'm so sorry I wasn't there before. I didn't know. If I had known—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "But I know now, and if you'll let me, I want to be part of your lives. If that's okay with your mom." Both boys looked up at Mara. The decision was hers, and they knew it. Mara had imagined this moment for 4 years. In her fantasies, it had gone 1,000 different ways. Theodore begging for forgiveness, Theodore accusing her of lies, Theodore not caring at all. She'd prepared herself for every scenario except this one. Genuine devastation, honest remorse. A man who'd just blown up his entire life because she'd walked through a door. "We can talk," she said finally. "But I need you to understand something, Theodore. This isn't about us. This isn't about what we had or what we lost. This is about them." She squeezed the boy's hands. "Everything I do is about protecting them. So if we go upstairs, if we have this conversation, and I get even the slightest feeling that you or your mother will hurt them—" "I won't," Theodore interrupted. "I swear on everything I have left, I won't hurt them. Or you. Not again. Never again." Mara studied his face, looking for the lie, for the manipulation, for any trace of the man who'd signed papers that silenced her while she carried his children. But all she saw was devastation and desperate sincerity. "Okay," she said. "Lead the way." They took a private elevator to the 14th floor, the space too small and too quiet. The twins stayed pressed against Mara, eyeing Theodore with cautious curiosity. Theodore stood in the corner, hands shoved in his pockets, looking like he wanted to say 1,000 things and had no idea where to start. The suite was massive. Living room, dining area, separate bedroom, all decorated in cream and gold. Evidence of wedding preparations littered every surface. Theodore's tuxedo jacket draped over a chair, Charlotte's cosmetics scattered across the vanity, champagne chilling in a bucket that would never be opened. "I was supposed to be married right now," Theodore said hollowly, staring at the untouched champagne. "We were supposed to cut the cake in an hour. First dance at 8, honeymoon to the Maldives tomorrow morning." "I'm sorry," Mara said automatically, then wondered why she was apologizing. Theodore laughed, sharp and bitter. "Don't be. You did me a favor, a brutal, devastating favor, but a favor nonetheless." He turned to face her. "Charlotte and we weren't in love. Not really. We were compatible, strategic. Our marriage made sense on spreadsheets and organizational charts. But love?" He shook his head. "I'm not sure either of us knew what that meant anymore." "You loved me once," Mara said quietly. "Or at least I thought you did." "I did." The words came fast, fierce. "I loved you more than I knew how to handle. That's why it hurt so much when I thought you'd cheated. That's why I believed my mother's evidence instead of trusting you. I couldn't bear the idea that what we had was a lie. So when she showed me proof that it was, he sank onto the couch, head in his hands. I took the easy way out. I let myself believe the worst because it hurt less than fighting for the truth. Liam and Connor had found the room service menu and were studying it with intense concentration. Mara let them wander, keeping them in her peripheral vision while she processed Theodore's confession. "Your mother fabricated everything," she said. "The photographs were staged using someone who looked like me from behind. The witnesses were paid. The phone records were doctored. None of it was real. I know that now." Theodore looked up, his face ravaged. "I've known something was wrong for years. The doubts never really went away, but by the time I started questioning, it was too late. You'd disappeared. The NDA meant I couldn't contact you even if I'd wanted to, and my mother kept saying you'd taken the money and moved on, that reaching out would just reopen old wounds." He laughed bitterly. "God, I was such a coward." "Mama, can we have cookies?" Connor appeared at Mara's elbow, menu in hand. She started to say no, then reconsidered. The boys had been incredibly well behaved through an absolutely chaotic situation. They deserved something normal. "1 cookie each," she agreed. "And milk." Connor whooped and ran to tell his brother. Theodore watched them with an expression of such raw longing that Mara had to look away. "They're amazing," he said softly. "Smart and brave, and they're better than I deserve." "They're not about what you deserve," Mara replied. "They're about what they need, and what they need is stability and honesty, and parents who put them first." She fixed him with a hard look. "Can you do that? Can you put them ahead of your mother's expectations and your company's needs and your social obligations?" "Yes," Theodore said immediately. "Absolutely yes. I'll do whatever it takes." "Even if it means going to war with your mother? Because that's what this is, Theodore. Evelyn isn't going to accept this quietly. She's going to fight for custody, try to prove I'm unfit, dig up every mistake I've ever made. She's going to make our lives hell." Theodore's jaw set in a line she remembered from when they'd first met, when he'd talked about standing up to his mother's control. He'd failed then. She wondered if he'd fail again. "Let her try," he said quietly. "I'm done letting her run my life. I'm done choosing her approval over everything else that matters." He stood, crossed to where Mara stood. "I can't undo the last 4 years. I can't give back the time I should have spent with my sons. But I can fight for the future. And I will. Whatever it takes." Mara wanted to believe him, part of her, the part that had loved him once, the part that sometimes woke up from dreams where none of this had happened, desperately wanted to believe him. But the lawyer in her, the survivor who'd learned to trust documents over promises, needed more than words. "I want it in writing," she said. "Child support, custody arrangements, legal recognition of paternity. I want every protection in place before your mother gets her lawyers involved." "Done. I'll call my personal attorney right now, not the family lawyers. Someone independent who works for me, not Crowley Holdings." Theodore pulled out his phone. "We'll do this right. Legally. Properly. So there's no question." A knock at the door interrupted them. Room service arrived with cookies and milk, delivered by a server who kept his eyes carefully averted from the bizarre domestic scene playing out in what was supposed to be a honeymoon suite. The boys settled on the floor with their snacks, creating an elaborate game involving cookie pieces as building blocks. Watching them, seeing them completely absorbed and content despite the chaos swirling around them, Mara felt the familiar swell of fierce protective love that had gotten her through the hardest days. Theodore made his phone call, pacing the length of the suite, speaking in low, urgent tones about paternity acknowledgement and emergency custody agreements. Mara listened with half an ear while watching her sons, making sure they weren't too close to the expensive furniture or the champagne bucket or anything else they could break. When Theodore hung up, he looked drained but determined. "David's coming here. He'll bring preliminary paperwork within the hour. We can start the formal process tomorrow, but at least we'll have something documented before—" He trailed off. "Before Evelyn counterattacks," Mara finished. "Yeah." They sat in uncomfortable silence, broken only by the boys' cheerful playing. So much to say, Mara thought. 4 years of conversations compressed into one impossible afternoon. Where did you even start? "Why did you really come today?" Theodore asked finally. "Was it just to expose my mother?" To get revenge? Mara considered lying, giving him some noble answer about truth and justice. But she was tired of lying, even to herself. I came because I was angry, she admitted, because your mother sent that invitation like it was a joke, like I was nothing, like our relationship and our love and our children didn't matter. I came because I wanted her to know that she didn't win, that I survived, that her grandsons exist, and they're beautiful and brilliant, and she has no claim to them because she threw us away. She paused. And yes, I wanted revenge. I wanted to ruin her perfect day the way she ruined my life. Theodore absorbed this silently. Did it work? Do you feel better? Did she? Mara examined her emotions, trying to separate the adrenaline from genuine satisfaction. Evelyn's face when she'd seen the twins, the wedding's spectacular collapse, the look of betrayal on Charlotte's face, 300 witnesses to the Crowley family's dirty secrets. I feel something, she said slowly. Not better, exactly. Not worse, just different. Like I finally said things that needed to be said. I'm glad you came, Theodore said quietly. Even though it destroyed my wedding and humiliated my family and probably cost Crowley Holdings millions in lost business deals. I'm glad you came. Because you were right. I deserved to know. They deserved to know their father, and my mother deserved to face consequences for what she did. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned. 17 missed calls from my mother, 12 from the company CFO, 8 from the board chairman. Another buzz. Make that 18 from my mother. You should probably answer eventually, Mara said. Probably. Theodore silenced the phone and set it face down on the table. But not yet. Right now, the only people I need to talk to are in this room. He approached the boys carefully, like they were wild animals that might spook. Hey guys, can I ask you some questions? Connor looked up, milk mustache prominent. Okay. What are your favorite things? Like, what do you love to do? Connor's face lit up. I like dinosaurs and building stuff and running really fast. I like books, Liam added quietly, and puzzles, and when Mama sings at bedtime. Your Mama sings? Theodore looked at Mara with surprise. I didn't know you sang. I don't, Mara said. Not well, but they like it, so... She shrugged. She sings good, Liam insisted loyally. She knows all the songs. Theodore smiled, and for a moment he looked like the man Mara had fallen in love with. Warm, genuine, present. What else should I know about you guys? For the next 20 minutes, Connor and Liam told Theodore everything. Their favorite colors, blue and green, their best friends at daycare, Emma and Marcus, their least favorite food, peas, both of them, with identical expressions of disgust. Their biggest fears, monsters under the bed in the dark. Their greatest dreams. Connor wanted to be a paleontologist. Liam wanted to be a veterinarian. Theodore listened like they were delivering the most important information in the world. He asked follow-up questions. He laughed at their jokes. He looked at Mara several times with an expression that said, "We made these incredible humans," and she had to look away because it hurt too much. The attorney arrived at 6:30, a trim man in his 50s carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expression of controlled alarm. Theodore, he said, shaking his client's hand, I got your message. I have to say, this is the most unusual wedding day call I've ever received. I'm full of surprises, David. Theodore introduced Mara, explaining the situation in clinical terms that somehow made it sound less insane. David listened without judgment, made notes, asked careful questions about dates and documentation. When Mara produced the DNA report, he read it thoroughly, nodding. This is solid, he said, court admissible. And with the birth certificates and your documented attempts at contact, he looked at Mara with something like respect. You've built a strong case, Ms. Quinn, very thorough. I'm a lawyer, Mara said. David's eyebrows rose. Are you? Where did you practice? I don't yet. I passed the bar last year. Right now I'm working at a nonprofit legal clinic in Boston. Family law, primarily. She did all this while raising twins and working full-time, Theodore added, his voice carrying a note of pride that surprised Mara. David whistled softly. Impressive. He pulled documents from his briefcase. All right, Here's what I've prepared. This is a voluntary acknowledgement of paternity. Theodore, by signing this, you're legally recognizing Liam and Connor as your biological children. It gives you rights, but also responsibilities. Child support, medical coverage, education costs, all of it. I understand, Theodore said. Where do I sign? They worked through the paperwork methodically. David explained each document, ensuring both parties understood the implications. Child support calculations based on Theodore's income, numbers that made Mara's head spin, preliminary custody arrangements, health insurance additions, educational trust funds. This is temporary, David cautioned. You'll need to file formal petitions with the court, establish legal custody agreements, possibly deal with challenges from other parties. He didn't name Evelyn, but everyone knew who he meant. But this gives you a foundation, legal recognition that these boys are Crowley heirs. Heirs. The word hung in the air like a threat. I don't want their money, Mara said quickly. I just want my sons protected. Their money is your son's birthright, David replied gently. Theodore is worth approximately $200 million personally and stands to inherit significant portions of Crowley holdings. Liam and Connor are entitled to their share of that legacy, whether you're comfortable with it or not. $200 million. Mara had been living on $30,000 a year. The numbers were so absurd they didn't feel real. We'll figure it out, Theodore said, reading her panic. One step at a time. Right now, we just need to make sure everything's legal and documented. They signed papers until Mara's hand cramped. With each signature, the impossible became more concrete. Theodore Crowley IV was the father of her children. In writing. With witnesses. Irrevocable. When David left at 8 o'clock, promising to file the paperwork first thing Monday morning, Mara felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. The boys had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from cookies and questions and the longest, strangest day of their young lives. I should get them back to our hotel, Mara said quietly, not wanting to wake them. They need their beds. Stay here, Theodore offered. There's plenty of room. The bedroom has a king bed and we can make up the couch for me. It's late. They're already asleep. Theodore, please. He wasn't touching her, but his eyes held hers with desperate sincerity. I just found out I have sons. Can I have one night? Just to watch them sleep and know they're real and try to process that my entire life just changed. Mara should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries, protected her independence, refused to blur the lines between co-parents and whatever else they might become. But Liam chose that moment to murmur in his sleep, reaching for his brother. Connor's hand found his automatically, their fingers intertwining with the unconscious intimacy of twins who'd never spent a night apart. One night, Mara agreed, but tomorrow we go back to Boston and figure out what comes next. No rushing, no assumptions, just one step at a time. One step at a time, Theodore echoed. I can do that. They moved the boys to the bedroom carefully, laying them on the massive bed and surrounding them with pillows so they wouldn't roll off. Mara changed them into their pajamas, packed optimistically in her bag, just in case, while Theodore watched from the doorway, memorizing every detail. When the boys were settled, Mara found Theodore sitting in the living room, staring at his silent phone. The missed call count had climbed past 50. You really should talk to her eventually, Mara said. I know. He set the phone aside. But tonight, I just want to sit here and think about the fact that I have sons. Smart, brave, beautiful sons who like dinosaurs and books, and their mother's terrible singing. He smiled at her, and it reached his eyes for the first time all day. Thank you. For what? For keeping them. For raising them. For not giving up when I failed you. For coming here today even though it terrified you. I know it did. I could see it in your eyes. Thank you for being stronger than I ever was. Mara's throat tightened. I did what I had to do. You did what I should have done, Theodore corrected. You fought. You survived. You built something beautiful out of the wreckage my mother created. He paused. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of them. And of you. I'm not asking you to be worthy of me, Mara said quietly. I'm asking you to be worthy of them. That's all that matters now. I know. Theodore stood, running his hands through his hair in a gesture she remembered from 100 late-night conversations. "You should sleep. It's been the longest day in history, and you must be exhausted." She was, bone-deep, soul-tired, running on fumes and adrenaline. "What about you?" "I'll take the couch. I don't think I could sleep anyway." He smiled wryly. "I was supposed to be married right now. Instead, I'm divorced before the wedding and a father of 3-year-old twins. My brain is still trying to catch up to reality." Mara wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease the shock written across his face. But comfort felt like too much, like crossing a line she wasn't ready to cross. "Good night, Theodore," she said instead. "Good night, Mara." She checked on the boys one final time, both still deeply asleep, hands clasped together, then settled into an armchair near the bed, unwilling to leave them alone in a strange place. Through the doorway, she could see Theodore sitting on the couch, illuminated by the city lights streaming through the windows. His phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Evelyn wasn't giving up. Mara knew that. This was just the opening salvo in what would be a long, brutal war. Evelyn Crowley didn't accept defeat. She regrouped. She strategized. She came back harder. But Mara had truth on her side, and documentation, and the law. And most importantly, she had 4 years of experience fighting battles everyone assumed she'd lose. Let Evelyn come. Let her bring lawyers and money and social pressure. Mara had already survived the worst she could do. Everything else was just details. Mara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of her son's laughter. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The room was too large, the sheets too expensive, the mattress too soft. Then it came flooding back. The plaza. The wedding. Theodore. She sat up quickly, heart pounding, and found the bed beside her empty. The boys' voices came from the living room, accompanied by a deeper voice she recognized. Mara pulled on yesterday's dress, wrinkled now, the blue silk creased from sleeping in the chair, and padded barefoot to the doorway. Theodore sat cross-legged on the floor in his rumpled tuxedo shirt and pants, bow tie discarded, building an elaborate tower out of room service napkins while Liam and Connor directed the construction with the seriousness of tiny architects. "No, it needs to be taller," Connor insisted. "Taller than you." "That's pretty tall," Theodore said solemnly. "Are you sure the foundation can support that kind of height?" "What's a foundation?" Liam asked. "It's the bottom part that holds everything else up. Like how your mom is the foundation of your family. She's the strong part that keeps everything together." Mara's breath caught. She must have made a sound because Theodore looked up, his face transforming when he saw her. "Good morning," he said softly. "I hope we didn't wake you. The boys got up about half an hour ago and I heard them talking, so I thought I'd better check." He gestured helplessly at the napkin tower. "We've been engineering." "I can see that." Mara moved into the room, running her fingers through her sleep-tangled hair. "What time is it?" "Almost 9. I ordered breakfast. I hope that's okay. I wasn't sure what the boys liked, so I got a little of everything." A room service cart held enough food for a small army. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, fruit, toast, pastries, 3 different kinds of juice. Mara thought about her usual breakfast routine, cereal and whatever fruit was on sale, and felt the vast gulf between their worlds open beneath her feet. "This is too much," she said quietly. Theodore stood, reading her discomfort. "I know, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to... I just wanted to make sure they had options." He lowered his voice. "Mara, I'm going to mess this up a lot. I've never been a father before. I don't know what I'm doing. If I overstep, just tell me." The honest vulnerability in his voice softened something in her chest. "They like pancakes," she said, "and strawberries. Connor will eat anything, but Liam's picky about textures." "Noted," Theodore smiled. "Pancakes and strawberries it is." They ate together in awkward domesticity, the boys chattering about the tall buildings they could see from the window, and whether the napkin tower would still be there when they came back. Theodore listened attentively, asked questions, and looked at Mara every few minutes like he was checking to make sure she was still real. Mara's phone buzzed. Text from Yolanda. "Girl, you're all over the internet. TMZ has a video. The Post has you on the front page." Secret Crowley airs Crash Society wedding. "Are you okay?" Mara's stomach dropped. She'd known there would be coverage, That had been part of the plan, but seeing it confirmed made it visceral. She pulled up TMZ. Sure enough, there she was in grainy cell phone video, walking down the aisle with the twins, Evelyn's face frozen in shock. The comments section had exploded, thousands of people weighing in on her dress, her children, her audacity. "What's wrong?" Theodore noticed her expression. "We're famous," Mara said flatly, showing him the screen. Theodore's face hardened as he scrolled through the articles. "My mother's PR team works fast. Look at this statement. The Crowley family is investigating claims made by an individual seeking financial gain. We take all such allegations seriously and will respond through appropriate legal channels." He looked up, furious. "She's already setting the narrative, making you look like an opportunist." "Let her," Mara said, though her voice shook slightly. "I have documentation. She has lies. Truth wins in court." "Not always." Theodore set down the phone. "Not when you're fighting someone with unlimited resources and no conscience." He paused. "I need to make a statement. Go on record supporting you. Counter her spin before it takes hold. That will make things worse with your mother." "Things with my mother can't get worse." Theodore's jaw set in that stubborn line. "She hid my children from me. Nothing she says or does matters anymore." A sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Theodore frowned, checked the peephole, and his expression darkened further. "It's hotel security, and my mother's head of security." He turned to Mara. "Take the boys into the bedroom. Lock the door." "Theodore, please, just until I know what this is." Mara gathered Liam and Connor quickly, their faces showing the first hints of worry at the adults' tension. She ushered them into the bedroom and closed the door, pressing her ear against it to listen. Theodore opened the suite door. "Gentlemen, to what do I owe this visit?" "Mr. Crowley," the hotel security manager sounded apologetic. "We have a situation. Mrs. Evelyn Crowley has requested we escort Miss Quinn and the children from the premises. She's cited trespassing and has threatened legal action against the hotel if we don't comply immediately." "Miss Quinn is my guest," Theodore said coldly. "She's not trespassing." "Sir, this is your mother's suite. She reserved it for the wedding party. Technically, she has authority to determine who—" "This is my suite," Theodore interrupted. "I'm paying for it. My credit card is on file. And I'm telling you that Miss Quinn and my sons are my invited guests. If you attempt to remove them, I'll sue this hotel for harassment and unlawful eviction." Silence. Then a new voice, older and harder. "Mr. Crowley, your mother is prepared to file for emergency custody of the minors. She has concerns about their welfare and the fitness of their current guardian." Mara's blood turned to ice. She'd expected this move, but not so soon. Not within 12 hours. "Based on what grounds?" Theodore's voice could have cut glass. "That's between Mrs. Crowley's attorneys and the court, but she's requested that the children remain in New York pending the hearing for their safety." "For their safety?" Theodore's laugh was bitter. "My mother didn't know these children existed until yesterday. She has no relationship with them, no claim to them, and no right to dictate where they live or with whom. Miss Quinn is their mother. She has sole legal custody, which I've now acknowledged through a formal paternity declaration filed with an attorney. Any attempt to remove those children from her care will be met with immediate legal action." "Sir, we're just delivering a message." "Then consider it delivered. Now get out of my suite before I call my lawyers and have you charged with attempted kidnapping." Footsteps retreated. The door slammed. Mara opened the bedroom door, her hands shaking. "She's filing for custody." "Of course she is." Theodore was already on his phone. "David, I need you back here immediately. My mother is attempting to file for emergency custody. Yes, this morning. I don't care if it's Sunday. Find a judge who owes us a favor." "No, they're not staying in New York. Mara and the boys are going back to Boston, where they're safe. Because my mother just sent security to try to remove them from my suite. That's why." He paced while he talked, one hand raking through his hair repeatedly. Mara watched him, trying to reconcile this fierce protector with the man who'd signed papers 4 years ago that silenced her. People could change, she supposed, or maybe crisis revealed who they'd always been underneath. "We need to leave," Mara said when Theodore hung up. Now, before she finds a judge who'll sign an emergency order. David's working on a counterfiling. He says if we can get you across state lines before any order is issued, New York courts won't have jurisdiction. Massachusetts courts would have to handle it, and you've been a resident there for 4 years. Much stronger position. Then we need to go. Mara was already moving, gathering the boys' things, checking for forgotten items. Liam, Connor, we're leaving. Put your shoes on, please. But the napkin tower, Connor protested. We'll build a better one at home, Mara promised. Right now we need to hurry. Theodore grabbed his wallet and phone. I'm coming with you. You don't have to. Yes, I do. His eyes met hers with absolute certainty. I'm not letting you face this alone. Not again. They took the service elevator to avoid the lobby, Theodore leading them through back corridors he'd learned during countless family events at the plaza. A town car waited in the loading dock. Theodore had called ahead while Mara was packing. Penn Station, Theodore told the driver. Fastest route. Avoid traffic cameras if possible. The driver nodded like this was a normal request. They made it 3 blocks before Theodore's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face went white. It's the family attorney. My mother's attorney. He answered. James, I wondered when you'd call. Mara could hear the tinny voice through the speaker, angry and clipped. Theodore listened for a moment, his expression growing colder with each word. Tell her no, he said finally. Tell her I said no to the custody filing, no to the emergency order, and no to every other attempt she makes to control my children's lives. A pause. Because they're my children, James. Not hers, mine. And I'm their father, which means I get a say in what happens to them. I don't care what she thinks is best. No, you listen to me. I want you to withdraw the filing immediately, or I'm going to hold a press conference where I explain exactly how my mother fabricated evidence to destroy my relationship, threatened the mother of my children, and is now attempting to kidnap my sons to maintain control over the family. How do you think the board will react to that? How do you think our investors will react? More angry buzzing from the phone. That's what I thought, Theodore said. Withdraw the filing, James, today, or I blow up everything. He hung up. Mara stared at him. You just threatened to expose your mother publicly. Yes. That will destroy Crowley Holdings. Tank the stock price. Cost millions in lost business. I know. Theodore, I don't care. He met her eyes. I don't care about the company or the stock price or my inheritance or any of it. My mother used all of those things to control me for 32 years. She convinced me that Crowley Holdings mattered more than my own happiness, more than love, more than truth. And I believed her. I chose money over you, Mara. I chose dynasty over family. I'm not making that mistake again. The boys sat between them in the car, too young to fully understand but picking up on the tension. Liam pressed against Mara's side. Connor watched Theodore with wide, worried eyes. It's okay, buddy, Theodore said gently to Connor. I know this is scary, but I promise, your mom and I are going to keep you safe. Both of you. Is the mean lady going to take us away? Connor asked in a small voice. Theodore's face crumpled. Did she say something to you, my mother? She looked at us mean, Liam whispered. Yesterday, when Mama was talking, she looked at us like she was mad. She was mad, Mara said carefully. But not at you, never at you. She was mad at me for telling the truth about some things she wanted to keep secret. That's a grown-up problem, not a kid problem. You boys didn't do anything wrong. Your mom's right, Theodore added. And no, the mean lady, my mother, is not going to take you away. I won't let that happen. Promise? Connor's voice wavered. I promise. Theodore held out his pinky. After a moment's hesitation, Connor hooked his tiny pinky around his father's. Pinky promise. The most serious promise there is. Connor relaxed slightly. Liam watched the exchange, then tentatively offered his own pinky to Theodore. The sight of his 2 sons making promises with a man they'd met less than 24 hours ago made Mara's throat tight. They reached Penn Station without incident. Theodore bought first-class tickets to Boston under a fake name, paying cash, acting like he'd done this before. Maybe he had. Maybe everyone with money had escape plans. The train didn't leave for 40 minutes. They waited in a private lounge, Theodore keeping watch on the entrance while Mara tried to distract the boys with a cartoon on her phone. Every time someone walked past, Mara's heart jumped. Every security guard looked like a threat. Every well-dressed person could be one of Evelyn's operatives. "This is paranoid," she muttered. "This is my mother," Theodore corrected. "Paranoid would assume she's playing fair." His phone buzzed with a text. He read it, and some of the tension left his shoulders. "David, the custody filing has been withdrawn. James must have convinced her it was a bad play." "For now," Mara said. "She'll try something else." "Probably." Theodore pocketed his phone. "But we have time to prepare. And you have home court advantage in Massachusetts." The announcement for their train finally came. They boarded quickly, Theodore carrying Liam when the boys' legs got tired, Mara holding Connor's hand. The first-class car was nearly empty. Most people didn't take trains from New York to Boston on Sunday mornings. They settled into their seats, the boys fascinated by the buttons that reclined the chairs and the table that folded down. Theodore ordered hot chocolate and cookies from the attendant, and Mara was too exhausted to object to more sugar. As the train pulled out of Penn Station, leaving New York behind, Mara felt something in her chest loosen fractionally. Not safety, not yet, but distance. Space between them and Evelyn's immediate reach. Theodore sat across from her, watching the city disappear through the window. "I grew up in that place," he said quietly. "I thought it was the whole world. Everything that mattered happened within 50 blocks. Everyone who mattered lived in the same buildings, attended the same schools, married the same kind of people." He looked at her. "You were the first real thing I'd encountered in my entire life. The first person who didn't care about my last name or my trust fund or what I could do for them. You just liked me. The actual me." "I loved you," Mara corrected softly. "Past tense." "I know." Pain flickered across his face. "I know I don't get that back. I know what I destroyed. But Mara, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you thought I was. The man who would have fought for you, who would have trusted you, who would have chosen love over everything else." "I don't need you to be that man for me," Mara said. "I need you to be that man for them." She nodded toward the boys, both absorbed in their hot chocolate. "They're what matters now." "I know, but—" Theodore stopped, started again. "Can I ask you something? And you can tell me it's none of my business. I'll understand, but the last 4 years, was there anyone else? Anyone serious?" Mara laughed without humor. "When would I have had time, between working 3 jobs and law school and raising twins? I barely had time to sleep, much less date." She met his eyes. "Why? Does it matter?" "No, maybe. I don't know." Theodore rubbed his face. "I guess I'm trying to figure out if there's any chance in the future, once things settle." He trailed off at her expression. "You're looking at me like I've lost my mind." "Because you have," Mara said bluntly. "Theodore, you were supposed to get married yesterday, to someone else. Your entire life imploded 24 hours ago. You're in shock. You're processing. You're not thinking clearly about anything, especially not about us." "I'm thinking very clearly," Theodore insisted. "Clearer than I have in years. Charlotte was a mistake. A beautiful, well-bred mistake I was making because it was expected. Because it made sense on paper. Because I'd convinced myself that love didn't matter as much as compatibility and shared goals and—" "Stop." Mara held up her hand. "Just stop. I'm not your redemption arc, Theodore. I'm not the lost love you get back because you finally stood up to your mother. I'm a single mother with a law degree and a nonprofit salary who's about to be dragged into the custody battle from hell. I don't have the energy to be your second-chance romance." Theodore absorbed this like a physical blow. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm pushing too hard, too fast. He looked at the boys again. "I want to do this right. All of it. Be a good father. Make amends for the past. Maybe eventually show you that I've changed. That I'm not the coward who signed those papers." "Then do it," Mara said. "Show me through actions, not words. Be there for Liam and Connor. Follow through on your promises. Stand up to your mother every single time she tries to interfere. Prove that you've changed by actually changing, not by declaring it." "I can do that," Theodore said quietly. I will do that. The train rolled through Connecticut, the landscape shifting from urban sprawl to suburbs to the first hints of countryside. The boys eventually fell asleep, lulled by the motion and the sugar crash. Mara watched them sleep, their faces relaxed and innocent, and wondered what world she'd brought them into. Theodore's phone buzzed constantly, texts and calls he ignored except to check the names. Board members, he muttered, investors, business partners, everyone wanting to know what the hell happened yesterday and whether Crowley Holdings is stable. Another buzz. And that's my mother, 9th call today. You should probably talk to her eventually, Mara said. Why? What's left to say? Theodore's voice was bitter. She lied to me. She manipulated me. She hid my children from me for 4 years. There's no conversation that fixes that. No, Mara agreed. But there are conversations that establish boundaries, that make your position clear, that protect Liam and Connor from whatever she tries next. Theodore considered this, then nodded slowly. You're right. I'll call her when we get to Boston. On your territory, with witnesses present. My apartment is 800 square feet, Mara warned, not exactly neutral ground. Better than her penthouse where she controls everything. Theodore smiled slightly. I'm done fighting battles on her turf. They arrived in Boston at 2 in the afternoon. Mara led them through the station, hyper-aware of the stares they attracted. Theodore in his rumpled tuxedo shirt, she in yesterday's gown, the twins in their little suits. They looked like they'd escaped from a very fancy, very dysfunctional wedding, which, essentially, they had. We need to get a cab to Dorchester, Mara said, pulling out her phone to call for a ride. I'll rent a car, Theodore offered. You don't need to... Mara. He touched her arm gently. I'm not trying to take over. I'm trying to help. Let me help. She wanted to refuse on principle, to maintain her independence, to prove she didn't need his money or his assistance. But she was exhausted, her feet hurt from yesterday's heels, and the boys were getting cranky with hunger and tired from the journey. Fine, she said. Thank you. The rental car was a sedan, nothing flashy, and Theodore drove carefully through Boston's chaotic streets following Mara's directions. She watched him navigate the unfamiliar city, saw him clock the gradual shift in neighborhoods from downtown's Polish to Dorchester's working-class sprawl. This is me, Mara said finally, pointing to a modest brick building on a tree-lined street. 3rd floor. Theodore parked and they climbed the stairs, the boys running ahead with renewed energy now that they were almost home. Mara unlocked the door to her apartment, their apartment, the space that had been refuge and fortress for 4 years, and felt oddly self-conscious about Theodore seeing it. It was clean but cluttered, full of the accumulated chaos of life with twins. Toys in bins, books on shelves, children's artwork taped to the fridge. The furniture was secondhand, the rugs were worn, the walls needed paint. It was nothing like the plaza, nothing like Theodore's world, and Mara found herself both defensive and defiant about it. It's small, she said unnecessarily. It's home, Theodore replied, looking around with something like wonder. This is where they grew up, where you raised them. He picked up a framed photo from the bookshelf, Mara and the boys at the park, all 3 grinning at the camera. You look happy. We are happy, Mara said firmly. We've built a good life here, a stable life. I can see that. Theodore set down the photo carefully. I'm not trying to disrupt it, Mara. I'm trying to be part of it, if you'll let me. The boys had already disappeared into their bedroom, tired of grown-up talk and eager to reunite with their toys. Mara could hear them through the thin walls, narrating an elaborate game involving dinosaurs and building blocks. I need to call my boss, Mara said. Let her know I'm back. Figure out when I can return to work. Take the week, Theodore suggested. I'll cover your salary. You need time to process everything, meet with lawyers, make plans. Mara's first instinct was to refuse. But pride was expensive, and she had 2 children to protect. 1 week, she agreed, but I'm paying you back once this settles. It's child support, Theodore pointed out. You don't pay back child support. It's not child support until the court orders it. Right now it's a loan. Theodore smiled faintly. Okay, it's a loan. We'll work out terms later. He pulled out his phone. I should call my mother. Get this over with. Use the bedroom, Mara offered. More privacy. Theodore nodded and disappeared down the short hallway. Mara heard the door close, then the muffled sound of his voice, tense and controlled. She made herself coffee, cheap grocery store brand, nothing like the plaza's room service, and stood at the window looking down at the street. Kids played basketball at the park across the way. A couple walked their dog. Normal life, continuing despite the fact that her own world had turned inside out. Her phone rang. Maria Hernandez. "Please tell me you're all right," Maria said without preamble. "Please tell me those photos online aren't as bad as they look." "I'm fine," Mara assured her. "Back in Boston. The boys are safe." "And the father?" "Here, in my apartment, calling his mother to tell her to back off." Silence. "Then, Mara, you need representation, real representation, not just his personal attorney. You need someone whose only loyalty is to you and those boys." "I can't afford—" "I'm not asking you to afford anything," Maria interrupted. "I'm offering pro bono. This is exactly the kind of case our clinic exists for, protecting vulnerable families from people with power and resources who think they can take whatever they want." Mara's eyes stung. "Maria, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering. Say yes, Mara. Let me help you." "Yes," Mara whispered. "Yes, thank you." "Good. I'll file paperwork tomorrow establishing your sole custody and his paternity acknowledgement. We'll make this airtight before his mother finds any cracks to exploit." Maria's voice softened. "You've been working yourself to death for 2 years, never complaining, never asking for help. Let me return the favor." After they hung up, Mara stood at the window for a long time, coffee cooling in her hands. Help! She'd forgotten what that felt like, having people in her corner. For 4 years, it had been just her and the boys against the world. Now suddenly there was Theodore and Maria and David the attorney, and maybe, possibly, a chance at something more stable than constant survival. Theodore emerged from the bedroom, his face drawn. "Well, that went about as well as expected." "What did she say?" "That I'm making the biggest mistake of my life. That you're a con artist who will bleed me dry and turn my sons against me. That Charlotte's family will never forgive this humiliation, and the business deals are already falling apart. That I'm throwing away my birthright for a woman who never loved me and children who aren't really mine." He met Mara's eyes. "I told her the DNA test proves they are mine, and that even if they weren't, I'd choose them over her and Crowley Holdings, and everything else she thinks matters." Then I hung up. "She'll retaliate," Mara said. "Let her try." Theodore's jaw set. "I'm done being afraid of my mother." The conviction in his voice was new, Mara thought. 4 years ago, he'd crumbled under Evelyn's pressure. Now he stood firm. People could change. Maybe, possibly. She'd believe it when the test came, when Evelyn launched her next attack and Theodore had to choose again. "I should go," Theodore said reluctantly. "Let you and the boys get back to your routine, but can I come back tomorrow? Spend time with them? Start figuring out what co-parenting looks like?" "You can come for dinner," Mara offered. 6 o'clock, nothing fancy, we're having spaghetti, but you can eat with us and help with bedtime and we'll see how it goes." Theodore's face lit up like she'd given him something precious. "I'd love that. Thank you." After he left, Mara checked on the boys, still playing contentedly in their room, and allowed herself 5 minutes to sit on the couch and simply breathe. 24 hours ago, she'd walked into the Plaza Hotel with a plan to expose Evelyn Crowley. Mission accomplished, with collateral damage she hadn't fully anticipated. Theodore in their lives. Media attention, legal battles looming, everything more complicated and more dangerous than she'd imagined. But also, Theodore on his knees promising his sons he'd protect them. Theodore standing up to his mother for the first time in his life. Theodore looking at Liam and Connor like they were miracles he didn't deserve but would die to keep. Maybe it would be enough. Maybe he'd follow through. Maybe this time, when Evelyn came with lawyers and money and threats, Theodore would stand firm. Or maybe he'd crumble again and Mara would be left picking up the pieces alone. Only time would tell. Time, as it turned out, moved faster than Mara expected. Theodore showed up for dinner the next evening at exactly 6 o'clock, carrying a bag of groceries that included fancy pasta sauce Mara would never buy, fresh Parmesan that actually needed grating, and a bouquet of flowers that made Liam ask if it was someone's birthday. "No birthday," Theodore said, kneeling down to the boy's level. "I just wanted to bring something nice for your mom because she's letting me have dinner with you guys." "Mama likes daisies best," Connor informed him seriously. "Those are roses. Roses are for weddings." Theodore's face went carefully blank at the word wedding. Mara rescued him by taking the flowers and finding a vase, actually a cleaned-out pasta sauce jar, but it worked. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to bring anything. I wanted to contribute." Theodore looked around her tiny kitchen like he wasn't sure where he fit. "Can I help with dinner?" Mara almost said no out of habit, then reconsidered. If they were going to co-parent, she needed to let him participate, even in small things. "You can set the table," she said. "Plates are in the cabinet above the sink. We eat in the living room because the kitchen table is broken." Theodore found the mismatched plates, hand-me-downs from 3 different sources, and carried them carefully to the coffee table where Mara had already spread out placemats. The boys showed him where everyone sat, Connor taking obvious pride in instructing his father on the proper household routine. They ate spaghetti on the couch, while a cartoon played on mute in the background. Theodore tried to use his fork properly while Liam and Connor happily slurped noodles and got sauce on their shirts. Normal, messy. Nothing like the formal dinners Theodore had grown up with. "This is really good," Theodore said, and Mara could tell he meant it despite the sauce being from a jar and the pasta being from a box. "It's spaghetti," she replied. "Not exactly gourmet." "It's perfect." Theodore watched Connor attempt to twirl noodles and fail spectacularly. "This is perfect." After dinner, Theodore helped with dishes. His first time washing plates in a sink instead of loading them into a dishwasher, Mara suspected. He was careful and thorough, asking where things went, learning the geography of her small kitchen. Then came bath time, which involved Liam and Connor turning the bathroom into a splash zone while Mara refereed and Theodore watched from the doorway with undisguised wonder. "Do they always have this much energy?" he asked as Connor created a tidal wave with his toy boat. "This is them tired," Mara said, wrestling Liam into pajamas. "You should see them at noon." Bedtime was the boys' favorite part. Stories and songs, and the elaborate ritual of checking for monsters under the bed. Mara usually did it alone, but tonight Liam requested that Theodore check his side of the room while Mama checked Connor's. Theodore got down on his hands and knees in his expensive slacks and peered under the bed with utter seriousness. "No monsters here," he announced. "Completely monster-free. I give this room a perfect safety rating." "What about the closet?" Liam asked nervously. Theodore checked the closet too, moving shoes and toys aside to demonstrate thoroughness. "Also clear. You guys are totally safe." The bedtime story was Connor's choice, a book about dinosaurs that Theodore read with surprising skill, doing different voices for each prehistoric creature. Liam fell asleep halfway through. Connor made it to the end, then yawned hugely and asked if Theodore would come back tomorrow. "If your mom says it's okay," Theodore replied, looking at Mara. "We'll see," Mara said noncommittally. After the boys were asleep, she and Theodore sat in the living room with coffee. Instant for her, the fancy French roast he'd brought for himself. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "You're good with them," Mara said finally. "I'm faking it," Theodore admitted. "I have no idea what I'm doing, but they make it easy. They're so open, trusting." He paused. "How did you do this alone for 4 years?" "I didn't have a choice." Mara wrapped her hands around her mug. "They needed a parent. I was all they had. So I figured it out." "You did more than figure it out. You raised 2 incredible kids while getting a law degree. That's not just survival, Mara. That's exceptional." She didn't know how to respond to that. Praise felt foreign, suspicious even. She changed the subject. "Maria, my boss, is filing paperwork tomorrow, establishing custody arrangements formally. Your paternity acknowledgement, child support calculations." "Oh, whatever she recommends," Theodore said immediately. "I'll sign anything that protects them." "You should have your own lawyer review it first." "I trust you." He met her eyes. "I know I don't deserve that trust anymore, but I'm trying to earn it back." Mara wanted to believe him. The dangerous part of her heart that had loved him once whispered that maybe, possibly, he'd changed. But trust wasn't built on good intentions. It was built on consistent actions over time. "We'll see," she said again. Theodore left at 9, after checking on the sleeping boys one more time and promising to text before he showed up next time. Mara locked the door behind him and leaned against it, exhausted. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Ms. Quinn, this is Patricia Anderson from the New York Times. I'm writing a piece about the Crowley wedding incident and would love to get your perspective. Could we schedule an interview?" Delete. Another text from another reporter. Delete. A third from a tabloid offering money for exclusive photos of the twins. Mara's hand shook as she blocked the numbers. This was only the beginning. The media circus had just started. The next 3 weeks fell into a strange new rhythm. Theodore came for dinner every night, learning the boys' routines, figuring out how to be a father in small increments. He learned that Liam needed his blue blanket to sleep, and Connor was afraid of the garbage disposal. He learned that they both loved when he read stories, but only Liam liked being tickled. He learned to check backpacks for school notices, and that fruit snacks were currency more valuable than gold. He also started paying for things. Child support came through immediately, an amount that made Mara's nonprofit salary look microscopic. He added the boys to his health insurance, which covered things like dental and vision and therapists if they needed them. He set up college funds with deposits that made Mara's stomach hurt. "This is too much," she protested after the 3rd week, looking at the bank statements. "It's calculated based on my income," Theodore replied. "It's actually less than the court would probably order, and it's not too much for my children." My children. He said it with such ownership now, such certainty, like he'd been their father from the beginning instead of for 3 weeks. Maria filed all the paperwork efficiently, establishing sole physical custody for Mara, with Theodore having regular visitation rights that would expand as the boys got comfortable. No judge would approve it immediately. These things took time. But it established intent, created a paper trail, built their case. And then, exactly 4 weeks after the wedding that never happened, Evelyn struck back. Mara was at work when Maria called her into the office with a grim expression. "We've been served," she said, sliding papers across the desk. "Evelyn Crowley is suing for grandparents' rights and partial custody. She's also filing a separate suit claiming you violated the NDA you signed 4 years ago by making public statements about the Crowley family, and she's seeking damages." Mara's vision tunneled. "How much?" $5 million. The number was so absurd it almost didn't register. $5 million. More money than Mara would earn in multiple lifetimes. "She's also requesting an immediate psychiatric evaluation of you to determine parental fitness," Maria continued, "and she's subpoenaed your financial records, employment history, medical records, and educational transcripts. She's building a case that you're unstable, opportunistic, and using the children for financial gain." "That's insane," Mara breathed. "I didn't even want Theodore's money. I just wanted him to know his sons existed." "I know, and we'll prove that. But Mara, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly. Evelyn Crowley has unlimited resources and no conscience. She's going to dig up every mistake you've ever made, every difficult moment, every time you struggled financially, or lost your temper, or made a less than perfect parenting decision." "I've made a lot of those," Mara admitted. "I've yelled at the boys when I was stressed. I fed them McDonald's for dinner because I was too tired to cook. I've let them watch too much TV so I could study for exams. I'm not a perfect mother." "No one is," Maria said firmly. "But you're a good mother who's done the best she could under impossible circumstances. We just need to make sure the court sees that." Mara called Theodore immediately. He answered on the first ring. "Your mother is suing me," she said without preamble. $5 million for violating the NDA, plus grandparents' rights. Silence. Then, low and furious, "I'll kill her." "Theodore, I'm not joking. I'm going to go to her office right now and—" "You're going to do nothing," Mara interrupted. "You're going to stay calm and let the lawyers handle this, because if you confront her, she'll use it as evidence that you're unstable and influenced by me." More silence. She could practically hear him forcing himself to breathe. "What do you need?" he asked finally. "I need you to testify," Mara said, "when this goes to court. I need you to tell the judge that your mother fabricated evidence. That I tried to contact you repeatedly, that I didn't violate the NDA because I was telling the truth. I need you to choose us over her, publicly, in court, on the record." "Done," Theodore said immediately. "Whatever you need, I'll testify to everything." "It's going to cost you," Mara warned. "Your mother will probably try to disinherit you, cut you off from the company, destroy your professional reputation. I don't care. You say that now, Mara." His voice was steel. "I have spent 4 weeks getting to know my sons. I've read them bedtime stories and taught them to ride bikes and watched them sleep and realized that they are the only thing in my entire life that matters. Everything else, the money, the company, my mother's approval, it's all meaningless compared to them. So yes, I'll testify. I'll tell the truth, and I'll deal with whatever consequences come." Mara closed her eyes, wanting desperately to believe him. Okay, Maria's filing our response. Court date is in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. 6 weeks to prepare for war against one of the most powerful women in New York. The night before the hearing, Mara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed reviewing her testimony, anticipating every question Evelyn's lawyers might ask, every trap they might set. Maria had prepared her thoroughly, but preparation didn't stop the fear. Her phone lit up with a text from Theodore. "Can't sleep either. Driving myself crazy thinking about tomorrow. How are the boys?" Mara typed back, "Asleep, blissfully unaware that their lives might change dramatically based on what a judge decides." "They won't." Theodore's response came immediately. "We won't let that happen." "You sound confident." "I'm terrified," Theodore admitted, "but I'm also certain. We're on the right side of this. Truth matters. It has to matter." Mara wanted to share his optimism, but she'd spent 4 years learning that truth didn't always win against money and power. The courtroom was smaller than Mara expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the seal of Massachusetts hanging behind the judge's bench. Nothing like the grand spaces in legal dramas, just a normal room where extraordinary things happen to ordinary people. Evelyn arrived with an army. 4 lawyers in expensive suits, a PR representative, and Harrison Pemberton himself, Charlotte's father, apparently still allied with Evelyn despite the wedding disaster. She wore widow's black, her silver hair perfect, her expression arranged in wounded dignity. Theodore sat beside Mara at the defendant's table, their lawyers flanking them. Maria had brought 2 associates and looked ready for battle. Theodore wore a simple navy suit, no tie, nothing flashy. He'd grown a beard in the past 6 weeks, said he was tired of seeing his father's face in the mirror every morning. The boys were with Yolanda, kept away from the courtroom deliberately. They didn't need to see this. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. She'd reviewed all the pretrial motions, all the evidence, all the accusations flying from both sides. Now she'd hear testimony and render judgment. "This court is now in session," Judge Morrison said, settling into her chair. "I've read the filings from both parties. Mrs. Crowley, your petition for grandparents' rights, and the lawsuit regarding NDA violations. Ms. Quinn, your response and counterclaims. This is quite a situation." "Your Honor, if I may," Evelyn's lead attorney stood, a silver-haired man named Richard Thornton who specialized in high-stakes family law. "This case is fundamentally about the welfare of 2 young children who have been kept from their paternal family by a mother with questionable judgment and documented financial instability." "Objection," Maria said calmly. "Ms. Quinn has no documented financial instability. She maintains steady employment, has never missed rent, and supports her children adequately on her income." "Adequately being the operative word," Thornton countered. "These children are heirs to a multi-billion-dollar fortune. They deserve more than adequate. They deserve the opportunities and advantages their heritage provides." "They deserve a mother who loves them," Maria shot back. "Which they have. Everything else is secondary." Judge Morrison held up her hand. "Counselors, let's proceed with testimony rather than opening arguments. Mr. Thornton, call your first witness." Thornton smiled. "The petitioner calls Evelyn Crowley to the stand." Evelyn rose gracefully and took the oath, her hand on the Bible steady and sure. She settled into the witness chair like it was a throne. "Mrs. Crowley, Thornton began gently. Can you describe your relationship with your son, Theodore? We've always been close, Evelyn said, her voice perfectly modulated for sympathy. I raised him to understand family values, responsibility, the importance of legacy. He's my only child, and I've devoted my life to ensuring his success and happiness. And were you aware of his relationship with Ms. Quinn 4 years ago? I was. Evelyn's expression turned pained. I tried to warn him. The woman was clearly after his money. She was a waitress with no education, no prospects. She saw my son as a meal ticket. Objection, Maria said sharply. Speculation and character assassination. Sustained, Judge Morrison agreed. Mrs. Crowley, please stick to facts rather than assumptions about Ms. Quinn's motivations. Evelyn inclined her head graciously. Of course, Your Honor. The facts are that Ms. Quinn accepted $50,000 in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement and agreeing to end all contact with my son. She took the money and disappeared. I assumed she'd moved on with her life. And when did you discover that she'd been pregnant with your son's children? At my son's wedding, Evelyn said, and here her voice broke slightly, a masterful touch. She crashed the ceremony with 2 small children, making wild accusations in front of 300 guests. It was traumatic for everyone involved. She didn't crash it, Theodore muttered beside Mara. You invited her. Maria put a hand on his arm, silencing him. Thornton continued his examination, building Evelyn's narrative carefully. She was the concerned grandmother, desperate to know her grandchildren. She was the protective mother, worried about her son's judgment. She was the victim of a con artist who'd violated a legal agreement for personal gain. It was all lies, but Evelyn delivered them beautifully. When Maria stood for cross-examination, the temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop. Mrs. Crowley, Maria began pleasantly, you said Ms. Quinn took $50,000 and disappeared. Is that accurate? Yes. And you claim you had no knowledge of the pregnancy? That's correct. Interesting. Maria pulled out a document. This is a medical record from Ms. Quinn's prenatal care, dated 7 weeks after she signed your NDA. It includes a note that she requested the bill be sent to a different address than her home address because, and I quote, trying to avoid harassment from ex-boyfriend's family. Would you characterize your behavior during that time as harassing, Mrs. Crowley? Evelyn's jaw tightened. I have no knowledge of that document. Really? Because I also have phone records showing 17 calls from various Crowley Holdings numbers to Ms. Quinn's phone in the month after she signed the NDA. Calls she couldn't answer because of the legal threats your lawyers made. Can you explain those calls? Perhaps employees were attempting to verify that the agreement was being honored. By calling her 17 times? Maria's eyebrows rose. That sounds less like verification and more like intimidation. Objection, Thornton said. Argumentative. Withdrawn. Maria smiled. Let's move on. Mrs. Crowley, you testified that you've devoted your life to your son's happiness. Is that accurate? Yes. Then can you explain why you fabricated evidence of Miss Quinn's infidelity 4 years ago? The courtroom went silent. Evelyn's composure cracked visibly. I did no such thing, she said, but her voice wavered. I have testimony from the private investigator you hired, Maria said, producing another document. Mr. James Chen, who states that you specifically instructed him to create photographs that would convince your son that Ms. Quinn was unfaithful. He's prepared to testify that you paid him $25,000 to stage those images using a woman who resembled Ms. Quinn from behind. Evelyn's face went white, then red. That man is lying to save his own reputation. Is he? Because I also have the financial records showing payment to his firm, and the testimony of the woman you paid to pose in those photographs, and the statements from 3 people who heard you discussing the plan at a charity luncheon. Maria's voice was steel wrapped in silk. You destroyed your son's relationship based on lies, Mrs. Crowley. You hid his children from him for 4 years, and now you want us to believe you're acting in their best interests? I was protecting him. Evelyn's composure finally shattered completely. That woman was going to ruin his life. She was common, unsuitable, completely wrong for our family. I did what any mother would do. I protected my son from making a catastrophic mistake. By lying to him? Maria pressed. By manipulating him? By keeping him from his own children? They're better off without... Evelyn stopped herself, but too late. Better off without what, Mrs. Crowley? Maria asked quietly. Better off without their father? Better off without your influence? Please, finish your thought. Evelyn looked at her lawyers desperately. Thornton stood. Your Honor, my client is clearly distressed. Could we take a brief recess? Denied, Judge Morrison said, and Mara could see steel in the judge's eyes now. Mrs. Crowley, please answer the question. Better off without what? Evelyn's hands trembled. Without the complications of a mother who clearly values money over their well-being. And yet, Maria said, Ms. Quinn never asked for money. She never contacted your son or your family after signing the NDA, despite being pregnant and struggling financially. She raised the children alone for 4 years without requesting support. The only reason you know about them now is because you invited her to your son's wedding to humiliate her. Isn't that true? That's not... You invited her, Maria repeated. You sent a formal invitation to her home address, which you obtained through private investigators. You wanted to parade your victory in front of her. You wanted her to see what she'd lost. But instead, she showed you what you'd done. She showed everyone in that ballroom exactly who Evelyn Crowley really is. Objection! Thornton was on his feet. Your Honor, this is badgering. Overruled, Judge Morrison said. I'd like to hear Mrs. Crowley's response. But Evelyn had nothing. She sat in the witness chair, her perfect composure destroyed, looking every one of her 62 years. No further questions, Maria said, returning to her seat. The redirect examination from Thornton was damage control, but the damage was done. Evelyn had revealed herself. Her manipulation, her cruelty, her complete disregard for anyone's well-being except her own version of family honor. When Theodore took the stand, he was calm and clear. Yes, his mother had shown him fabricated evidence. Yes, he'd believed it because he'd been raised to trust her completely. Yes, he'd failed Mara and his children and himself by not questioning, not investigating, not fighting harder. I was a coward, Theodore said simply. My mother controlled every aspect of my life, and I let her because it was easier than standing up to her. But I'm done being controlled. I'm done choosing her approval over truth. Those boys are my sons. Mara is their mother, and my mother's money and power don't change what's right. Evelyn's lawyers tried to paint him as manipulated by Mara, as unstable, as rebelling against his mother in some kind of delayed adolescence. But Theodore's testimony was unshakable. He loved his sons. He supported their mother. He wanted his mother nowhere near his children unless and until she could prove she'd changed. When Mara took the stand, she was terrified her voice would shake, that she'd break under cross-examination, that 4 years of struggle would be used as evidence of unfitness. But Maria had prepared her well. She told the truth simply and clearly. The relationship, the pregnancy, the attempts to contact Theodore, the years of raising the boys alone while building a career and a life, the invitation that had seemed like cruelty but had become an opportunity for truth. I'm not a perfect mother, Mara said when Maria asked about her parenting. I've made mistakes. I've lost my temper. I've struggled financially. But I've loved those boys every single day of their lives. I've protected them and provided for them and taught them that truth matters more than money. They are happy, healthy, well-adjusted children who know they are loved. That's what I can offer them. Not mansions or trust funds or social connections, just love and truth, and a mother who will fight anyone who tries to hurt them. When Thornton cross-examined her, trying to trip her up on the NDA violation, Mara was ready. The NDA prohibited me from making false claims about the Crowley family, she said. I didn't make false claims. I told the truth. Theodore is the father of my children. That's a fact, proven by DNA. Evelyn fabricated evidence to destroy our relationship. That's a fact, proven by testimony and financial records. Nothing I said at that wedding was false. Therefore, I didn't violate the agreement. Thornton tried different angles. Her finances, her education, her capacity to raise children in the manner they deserved as Crowley heirs. But every attack fell flat because Mara had been living the truth for 4 years. She knew exactly who she was and what she'd accomplished. The hearing lasted 3 days. Witnesses testified on both sides. Financial experts discussed child support. Psychologists evaluated parenting capacity. The judge asked pointed questions and took extensive notes. On the third day, Judge Morrison rendered her decision. "This has been one of the most disturbing cases I've encountered in 20 years on the bench," she began. "I've heard testimony about fabricated evidence, intimidation, manipulation, and the weaponization of wealth against a vulnerable young mother. I've also heard testimony about a woman who, despite impossible circumstances, raised 2 children with love and dedication while earning a professional degree." Evelyn sat rigid in her chair. Theodore's hand found Mara's under the table, squeezing tight. "Mrs. Crowley, your petition for grandparents' rights is denied," Judge Morrison said flatly. "You have demonstrated no existing relationship with these children and no evidence that contact with you would be in their best interests. Furthermore, your history of manipulation and dishonesty makes you an unsuitable influence." Evelyn gasped audibly. Thornton put a hand on her arm, silencing her. "Regarding the NDA violation claim," the judge continued, "I find that Ms. Quinn made truthful statements about verifiable facts. An NDA cannot be used to enforce silence about truthful information, particularly when that information concerns the welfare of minor children. Your lawsuit is dismissed, Mrs. Crowley, with prejudice." Maria squeezed Mara's other hand, triumphant. "Finally," Judge Morrison said, "I'm issuing a restraining order preventing Mrs. Crowley from contacting Ms. Quinn or the minor children directly. Any future contact must go through attorneys and must be approved by this court. Furthermore, I'm ordering Mrs. Crowley to pay Miss Quinn's legal fees in defending against this frivolous litigation." The gavel came down. They'd won. Evelyn stood abruptly, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. "This is not over," she hissed at Theodore as she passed their table. "You've made a terrible mistake. The board will never accept this. The family will never forgive you." "I don't care," Theodore replied calmly. "I finally figured out what actually matters." Evelyn swept from the courtroom, her legal team trailing behind her like the wreckage of a shipwreck. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Theodore made a brief statement. He supported the judge's decision, he was committed to his sons, and he had no further comment about his mother. Mara said nothing, just held Maria's hand and tried not to cry with relief. That night, they celebrated at Mara's apartment with pizza and ice cream. The boys knew something good had happened, but not exactly what. They were just happy to have Theodore there, reading stories and checking for monsters and promising that, yes, he'd come back tomorrow. After the boys were asleep, Theodore and Mara sat on the small balcony outside her living room, looking at Boston's lights. "She'll try again," Mara said quietly. "Your mother, she won't accept this." "Probably," Theodore agreed. "But each time she does, we'll win, because we have something she'll never understand." "What's that?" "The truth." Theodore looked at her, and each other, and 2 incredible kids who deserve parents who actually put them first. Mara let herself lean against him, just slightly. Not romance, not yet, but partnership, alliance. The beginning of trust rebuilt from ruins. "Thank you," she said, "for showing up, for testifying, for choosing us." "Thank you for giving me the chance," Theodore replied, "for not giving up, for being stronger than I ever was." They sat in comfortable silence as the city hummed around them. 2 people who'd destroyed and been destroyed by love, now carefully building something different, something honest, something that might actually last. 3 months after the court ruling, Evelyn Crowley made her final play. It started with a phone call to Theodore at 7 in the morning. Mara was making breakfast when she heard his phone ring from the bedroom where he'd started keeping a change of clothes for the mornings he stayed over on the couch after late nights with the boys. "Don't answer it," Mara called, knowing without looking that it would be Evelyn. She'd been calling weekly, testing the restraining order's boundaries, leaving voicemails that Theodore deleted without listening. But this time Theodore answered. Mara heard his voice shift from groggy to alert to furious in the span of 10 seconds. He emerged from the bedroom, phone pressed to his ear, his face drained of color. "When?" he demanded. "How many board members?" A pause. "I'll be there in 2 hours." "What happened?" Mara asked as soon as he hung up. "Emergency shareholder meeting. My mother convinced the board to call a vote of no confidence against me as future CEO. She's trying to have me removed from the company entirely. Theodore was already pulling on yesterday's shirt, searching for his shoes. If she succeeds, she'll use it as evidence that I'm financially unstable, unreliable. She'll reopen the custody case claiming I can't provide for the boys. Can she do that? After the judge's ruling? She can try. Theodore found his shoes under the coffee table. And with enough money and the right lawyers, she might succeed. I need to fight this, Mara. I need to show the board that she's the liability, not me. Then go, Mara said. But Theodore, don't let her make you choose between the company and us, because if it comes to that, I choose you, Theodore interrupted, every single time. The company, the money, all of it. It's meaningless without you and the boys. He kissed her forehead quickly, a gesture that had become natural over the past months. I'll call you after the meeting. He was gone before the boys woke up, leaving Mara to explain why Daddy had to leave early for work. Connor accepted this easily. Liam, more perceptive, asked if the mean grandmother was being mean again. She's trying, Mara admitted carefully. But your daddy is handling it. She tried to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting to Manhattan, to a boardroom where Evelyn was undoubtedly orchestrating Theodore's professional destruction with the same precision she'd used to destroy their relationship 4 years ago. The call came at 2 in the afternoon. Mara stepped out of a client meeting to answer. It's done, Theodore said, and his voice was strange, hollow. She won. The board voted 8-4 to remove me from the executive track. I'm still technically employed, but I'm being moved to a consultancy role with no real authority. Effectively, I've been fired from my own family's company. Theodore, I'm so sorry. Don't be. Now his voice carried something else, something that sounded almost like relief. She played her hand, Mara. She showed everyone in that room exactly who she is. 3 board members walked out in protest. Harrison Pemberton, Charlotte's father, stood up and announced that Pemberton Finance is severing all business relationships with Crowley Holdings effective immediately. He said, and I quote, "I won't do business with people who weaponize family relationships for corporate control." Mara's breath caught. That's huge. It gets better. 2 other major investors followed his lead. By the time I left that building, Crowley Holdings had lost approximately 40% of its market value. The stock is in freefall. My mother spent 3 months orchestrating my removal, and in the process, she destroyed the company she was trying to protect. What does this mean for you? It means I'm free. Theodore laughed, slightly manic. For the first time in my life, I'm completely free of that place. No obligations, no expectations, no more pretending to care about quarterly earnings and shareholder dividends. A pause. It also means I need to find a job. Turns out being fired from your family business doesn't look great on a resume. You have a law degree you never used, Mara pointed out. From Harvard. You could practice. Could I? Theodore sounded genuinely uncertain. I've spent 10 years doing corporate strategy. I don't know if I remember how to be a lawyer. Then relearn, Mara said simply. You helped me study for the bar, remember, back when we were together? You know the law, Theodore. You just forgot that you knew it. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, you really think I could do that? I think you can do anything that doesn't involve letting your mother control your life, Mara replied. The question is, what do you want to do? I want to come home, Theodore said. I want to pick up the boys from daycare and help with dinner and read bedtime stories and sleep on your extremely uncomfortable couch. Is that okay? Home. He'd started calling her apartment home about 6 weeks ago, casually, and then with increasing frequency. Mara hadn't corrected him because somewhere along the way, it had become true. Come home, she said. We'll be here. That evening, while the boys built elaborate block towers and Theodore grilled cheese sandwiches with increasing competence, Mara's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Quinn? An unfamiliar woman's voice. My name is Janet Morrison. I'm a senior investigative journalist with the Wall Street Journal. I'm working on a story about Evelyn Crowley and Crowley Holdings. I was hoping we could talk. Mara's instinct was to refuse. She'd avoided the press religiously since the courthouse steps 3 months ago, but something in the woman's tone suggested this was different. "What kind of story?" she asked carefully. "The kind that exposes financial fraud, corporate malfeasance, and the systematic abuse of power over multiple decades," Janet replied bluntly. "I've been investigating the Crowley Empire for 2 years, Ms. Quinn. Your situation with Theodore and the custody battle gave me the opening I needed to start asking questions publicly. What I found is extensive and damning." Mara's heart began to pound. "What did you find?" "Stock manipulation, insider trading, bribery of public officials, tax evasion through offshore accounts, corporate espionage, 3 separate instances of witness intimidation in civil cases." "Your NDA situation isn't unique, Ms. Quinn. Evelyn Crowley has been silencing people for 30 years. You're just the first one who refused to stay silent." "How many others?" Mara asked. 17 that I can confirm. Business partners she destroyed, employees she blackmailed, family members she erased from the company after disagreements. All of them signed NDAs. All of them took money to go away quietly. But I have testimony from 5 of them willing to go on record now that you've proven Evelyn isn't untouchable. Mara looked at Theodore, who was watching her with growing concern. She put the phone on speaker. "What do you need from me?" Mara asked. "An interview," Janet said. "On the record, about the fabricated evidence, the intimidation tactics, the custody battle. Your story is the center of this investigation, Ms. Quinn. It's the piece that makes everything else make sense. It shows pattern and practice. It demonstrates that Evelyn Crowley has been operating outside the law for decades and using NDAs to cover her tracks." "If I do this," Mara said slowly, "she'll come after me again. She'll find new ways to retaliate." "She's already coming after you," Janet pointed out. "She tried to take your children. She tried to destroy Theodore's career. She'll keep trying until someone stops her. This investigation could do that." "Financial crimes, Ms. Quinn, federal charges. The SEC is already interested. If my story runs with your testimony as the centerpiece, it could trigger a formal investigation that even Evelyn's lawyers can't intimidate away." Theodore crossed to Mara, taking her free hand. His eyes asked the question, "Do you want to do this?" Mara thought about the 17 other people Evelyn had silenced, the pattern of abuse spanning 3 decades, the way Evelyn had looked at Liam and Connor in that ballroom, not as grandchildren, but as complications, problems, things to be managed or eliminated. "I'll do the interview," Mara said. "When do you need me?" The article ran 3 weeks later, above the fold on the Wall Street Journal's front page. The headline read, "The Crowley Empire, How One Woman Built a Fortune on Fraud and Fear." Mara's story was the opening salvo, but Janet hadn't been exaggerating about the scope of her investigation. 23,000 words detailing 30 years of systematic corruption. Evelyn's tactics laid bare in excruciating detail. The fabricated evidence against Mara was just one example in a catalog of manipulation, but the real bombshell was the financial crimes. Janet had traced offshore accounts, documented insider trading, exposed bribery schemes that involved state senators and federal regulators. The evidence was overwhelming, meticulously documented, legally bulletproof. Within 6 hours of publication, the SEC announced a formal investigation. Within 12 hours, the FBI raided Crowley Holdings headquarters. Within 24 hours, Evelyn Crowley was arrested. Mara watched the news footage with Theodore beside her on the couch, both boys mercifully asleep in the bedroom. Evelyn being led from her Fifth Avenue penthouse in handcuffs, her perfect silver hair slightly disheveled, her expression furious and disbelieving. "She actually looks surprised," Theodore murmured, "like she genuinely believed this would never happen to her." "People like her always think they're untouchable," Mara replied, "right up until they're touched." The trial took 8 months. Evelyn's legal team was formidable, but the evidence was overwhelming. 17 witnesses testified to her intimidation tactics. Forensic accountants traced decades of financial crimes. The jury deliberated for 4 days before returning guilty verdicts on 12 counts of fraud, 3 counts of insider trading, and 6 counts of witness tampering. Mara attended the sentencing hearing with Theodore, Maria, and Yolanda. They sat in the back of the courtroom while Evelyn stood before the judge in a gray suit that made her look older than her 63 years. Mrs. Crowley, Judge Harold Chen said, "You have built an empire on lies, manipulation, and the systematic abuse of people you perceived as beneath you. You've destroyed careers, relationships, and lives in service of your own power. This court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison with eligibility for parole after 10. 15 years. Evelyn would be 78 before she could even apply for release. The courtroom erupted. Evelyn remained standing, rigid and silent, as guards approached to take her into custody. For just a moment, her eyes found Theodore in the gallery. Theodore met her gaze steadily. He didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't show any of the guilt or uncertainty that had characterized their relationship for 3 decades. He simply watched as guards led his mother away, ending her reign absolutely. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. This time, Theodore gave a statement. "My mother made choices," he said clearly, Mara standing beside him in solidarity. "She chose power over family, control over love, and lies over truth. Those choices have consequences. I hope that during her incarceration, she finds the ability to reflect on the harm she's caused and perhaps, someday, to feel genuine remorse. But whether she does or not, my focus is on the future, on my sons, their mother, and building a life based on honesty rather than manipulation." "Do you forgive her?" a reporter called out. Theodore considered this. "I'm working on it," he said honestly. "Forgiveness isn't something that happens overnight, especially when someone has spent your entire life controlling and manipulating you. But I'm trying to let go of anger because holding on to it only gives her more power, and I'm done giving her power over my life." They drove back to Boston in silence, processing the finality of it. Evelyn was gone. Not dead, but removed. Locked away where she couldn't hurt them, couldn't manipulate, couldn't destroy. "How do you feel?" Mara asked as they crossed into Massachusetts. "Empty," Theodore admitted. "Relieved, sad, all of it at once. She's my mother, you know. Despite everything, despite the lies and the cruelty, she's still my mother. And now she's going to prison for possibly the rest of her life because she couldn't stop trying to control everything." "That was her choice," Mara reminded him gently. "Not yours." "I know, but it still hurts." Mara took his hand. Over the past year, physical affection had become natural between them. Casual touches, hands held, the occasional kiss on the forehead or cheek. Nothing romantic yet, both of them too cautious and too scarred to rush. But partnership. Genuine partnership built on trust earned day by day. 6 months after Evelyn's sentencing, Theodore passed the Massachusetts bar exam. He'd spent those months relearning the law, studying late into the night at Mara's kitchen table while she reviewed cases for the legal clinic. They'd become study partners again, like they'd been years ago before everything fell apart. Maria offered him a position at the clinic immediately. "We need good lawyers who understand what it's like to fight people with unlimited resources," she said. "Plus, you and Mara work well together. The clients respond to you both." Theodore accepted. The salary was a fraction of what he'd made at Crowley Holdings, but he didn't care. He'd sold his shares in the company before the stock completely tanked, invested wisely, and had enough to be comfortable, if not extravagant. More importantly, he had purpose. He represented people crushed by corporate malfeasance, by powerful families, by systems designed to protect wealth over justice. He was good at it. Turned out that understanding how the powerful manipulated the system made him exceptionally equipped to fight against it. Mara and Theodore became the clinic's most effective team. They worked landlord disputes, custody cases, employment discrimination, all the ways vulnerable people got crushed by those with more money and fewer scruples. They won more than they lost, and when they lost, they fought appeals until they won. The boys adapted to their new normal with the resilience of young children. Theodore was fully integrated into their lives now, picking them up from school, attending parent-teacher conferences, coaching their soccer team with enthusiastic incompetence. Liam and Connor called him Daddy without hesitation, loved him without reservation, and had no memory of a time when he wasn't there. Sometimes, late at night after the boys were asleep, Mara would find Theodore looking at old photos on his phone, pictures of Liam and Connor as babies that he'd missed, first steps he hadn't witnessed, birthday parties where he'd been absent. I can't get that time back, he said once, tears in his eyes. 4 years of their lives that I'll never know. No, Mara agreed. But you have all the years ahead, and you're showing up for those. That's what matters. It was during one of these late-night conversations, nearly 18 months after the wedding that never happened, that Theodore asked the question Mara had been half expecting, half dreading. Do you think you could ever love me again? He said quietly. Not the person I was. The person I am now. The person I'm trying to be. But Mara looked at him. This man who'd destroyed her and been destroyed, who'd rebuilt himself from the ground up, who showed up every single day to be a father to his sons and a partner to her in every way except the romantic one. I think I already do, she admitted. It's different than before, less naive, more complicated, built on shared trauma and hard work instead of fairy tale romance. But yeah, Theodore, I love you. The question is whether we're ready to risk trying again. Are we? Theodore asked. Mara thought about it honestly. The past year and a half had taught her that Theodore had genuinely changed. He'd chosen the boys over his inheritance. He'd testified against his mother. He'd walked away from wealth and power to work at a nonprofit legal clinic, making a fraction of his former salary. He'd shown up consistently and persistently, even when it was hard. But trust, once shattered, was difficult to rebuild completely. There was still a part of Mara that waited for him to choose something else over them, to reveal that his transformation was temporary, to become his mother's son again. I think we're getting there, she said carefully. But I need more time. I need to be sure that this version of you is permanent, not just a reaction to crisis. Because the boys are settled now. They love you. If we try a romantic relationship and it fails, if you decide you want something else or someone else, it won't just hurt me. It'll hurt them. I understand, Theodore said, and I'm not going anywhere. However long you need, I'll wait. I'll keep showing up. I'll keep proving that I'm someone you can trust. Okay, Mara said. Then let's see where we are in another year. That year passed in the quiet rhythm of ordinary life. Work at the clinic, dinners together, bedtime routines with the boys. Theodore moved from the couch to the second bedroom that had previously been Mara's home office. It wasn't romantic, but it was domestic. Co-parenting evolved into genuine partnership, evolved into something that felt increasingly like family. The boys started kindergarten. Liam loved reading, absorbing chapter books at a pace that amazed his teachers. Connor became obsessed with dinosaurs and could name every species in Latin. They were bright, happy children who knew they were loved by both parents and had no concept that their family had ever been broken. On the anniversary of the day Mara had walked into the Plaza Hotel, 2 years later, Theodore took her to dinner. Just the two of them, Yolanda watching the boys. An actual date at a restaurant that wasn't fast food or pizza. 2 years ago today, you crashed my wedding and destroyed my entire life, Theodore said, raising his wine glass. You're welcome, Mara replied, smiling. I'm serious. Theodore set down his glass. You saved me, Mara. From a life of going through the motions, marrying the right person for the wrong reasons, becoming my mother. You gave me the chance to be someone better, someone real. You did that yourself, Mara corrected. I just provided the catalyst. Maybe. Theodore reached across the table, taking her hand. Here's what I know. I love you. I love our sons. I love the life we've built. And I know you said you needed time, and I respect that. But I also want you to know that I'm ready whenever you are. To try again. To do this right. To build something that lasts. Mara looked at their joined hands, thinking about everything they'd survived. The lies and the court battles and the public humiliation and Evelyn's imprisonment. The slow rebuilding of trust. The countless small moments, Theodore learning to braid Liam's hair, Mara teaching him to cook more than grilled cheese, family movie nights and shared homework struggles and all the mundane magic of everyday life. I'm ready, she said. Theodore's face transformed. Really? Really? Mara smiled. You've shown up, Theodore, every single day for 2 years. You've proven you're someone different than you were. Someone better. Someone I can trust with my heart and with our sons' hearts. So yeah, I'm ready to try this again. Theodore stood, came around the table, and kissed her properly for the first time in 6 years.
It felt like coming home and starting over simultaneously. "I'm going to do this right," he promised. "No grand gestures, no pressure, just us figuring it out together." "That sounds perfect," Mara said. They took it slowly. Dating while living together and co-parenting was strange but workable. They had designated date nights where Yolanda watched the boys. They had serious conversations about boundaries and expectations and what they both needed from a relationship. They went to couples therapy with a counselor who specialized in rebuilding trust after betrayal. It wasn't always easy.
Sometimes old hurts resurfaced. Sometimes Mara's walls went up, and Theodore had to be patient while she worked through fear. Sometimes Theodore's guilt about the lost years made him overcompensate, and Mara had to remind him that presence mattered more than grand gestures. But they worked through it together, building something honest and sustainable. Something that looked nothing like fairy tales but felt infinitely more real. A year later, Theodore proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or with a huge production, but at home after bedtime stories with Liam and Connor already asleep and the apartment quiet. "I don't want to recreate what we had before," he said, kneeling in their small living room with a simple ring. "That relationship was built on illusions and broken by lies. But I want to build something new with you, something based on truth and trust and partnership. Will you marry me, Mara? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I choose you and our boys over everything else?" "Yes," Mara said through tears. "Yes." They married 6 months later at Boston City Hall with Yolanda and Maria as witnesses and the boys as ring bearers. No Plaza Hotel, no 300 guests, no grand production, just truth and love and family. Evelyn sent a card from prison, the first communication in 3 years. It said simply, "I hope you're happy." Mara couldn't tell if it was genuine or bitter, blessing or curse. Theodore read it once and filed it away. "Maybe someday I'll be ready to process my relationship with her," he said. "But today isn't that day. Today is about us." They honeymooned in Maine at a beach cottage, the boys building sand castles and collecting shells, while Mara and Theodore walked the shore and talked about the future. Theodore wanted to expand their work at the clinic, maybe start a foundation focused on fighting corporate abuse. Mara was considering running for the state legislature, using her experience to change laws that protected the powerful. "We could do a lot of good," Theodore said. "Together." "We already are," Mara replied. 5 years after the wedding that never happened, Mara stood in their new apartment, bigger than her old place in Dorchester, but still modest by most standards, watching her family. Liam and Connor, now 8 and reading above grade level, arguing cheerfully over whose turn it was to pick the movie. Theodore making his signature spaghetti that had graduated from barely edible to actually pretty good. Yolanda and Maria coming over for their weekly dinner. This was what winning looked like, Mara thought. Not mansions or trust funds or social status, just people who loved each other, showing up consistently, building something real from the ashes of something broken. Evelyn was still in prison and would be for years yet. Crowley Holdings had restructured, survived, but would never again have the power or influence it once wielded. The money was still there. The boys had trust funds, Theodore had his inheritance, but it wasn't what defined them anymore. What defined them was the choice to build something honest, to value truth over appearances, to prioritize love over power. Theodore came up behind Mara, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "That we actually did it," Mara said. "We survived. We built something real. We won." "We did," Theodore agreed. "Though I think you won years ago when you walked into that ballroom. Everything after that was just epilogue." "Good epilogue, though," Mara said, leaning back against him. "The best," Theodore confirmed. Liam called that dinner was ready. Connor wanted to show them both a picture he'd drawn. Life moved forward in its beautiful, messy, ordinary way. Mara had walked into the Plaza Hotel 2 years ago with twins, a DNA test, and a plan to expose Evelyn Crowley's cruelty. She'd expected vindication. What she got instead was everything: a partner who chose growth over comfort, sons who knew they were loved by both parents, a family built on truth instead of lies. The woman who'd been invited to witness defeat had rewritten the entire story. She'd turned cruelty into catalyst, humiliation into power, and whispered secrets into shouted truth. And in the end, against all odds and against one of the most powerful women in New York, Mara Quinn had won absolutely. Not because she'd destroyed Evelyn Crowley, though she had, but because she'd built something better from the wreckage. Something honest, something lasting, something real. That, more than any courtroom victory or prison sentence, was the real triumph. The quiet, daily victory of choosing love and truth and showing up for the people who mattered. The revolution of refusing to be erased, silenced, or diminished. Years later, when Liam and Connor asked about how their parents got together, Mara would tell them a carefully edited version. About loving and losing and finding each other again. About choosing courage over silence. About the importance of truth even when lying would be easier. She wouldn't tell them about the calculated revenge, the spectacular public humiliation, or the complete destruction of their paternal grandmother's empire. Those details could wait until they were older. For now, it was enough to say that sometimes the cruelest invitations lead to the most beautiful destinations. That sometimes you have to tear down everything false to build something true. And that love, when given a second chance and built on honesty instead of illusion, can actually last. The end.